Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to episode number 2. I decided to try to go about setting this up a different way. Right now, I'm sort of streaming through this board that I have. I decided to try going about it a different way, where we're streaming through some software that I have, which would have enabled me to appear with when your comments showed up. We could cut to a screen and your comments would pop up. I had little overlays. I had a little thing up here that said the screenwriting show. Okay, that as soon as I hit go live at 2 o'clock, it said nope, sorry. So here we are, episode number 2. Still trying to figure this streaming thing out. So I thank you for bearing with me as I figure out the streaming thing. And we're just going to sort of go back to what we did last week, which is more or less just we're going to talk generally about all things screenwriting. So if you have questions or you have problems or issues, I'm not going to be able to share my screen. So I had brought up a script page that we could look through and I could highlight things for you. What I want to do, as if you were here last week, you may know this. If you're new, welcome. My goal here is to create sort of the preeminent screenwriting show on screenwriting, all things screenwriting, from the art and the craft of it, how you do it, techniques to go about doing it, the problems writers run into, and myths and misconceptions that get in your way. Maybe if you're writing a script, but for some reason nobody will read it, we'll address those kinds of things and try to lift your game a bit. But also things like the business and how it works and why it's so hard to break in and how to break in if you can't break in, all that kind of stuff. The strategy that I promote and what I suggest as a way to build your career. One of the things that came up this past week was somebody had mentioned that it was impossible to, the odds were, I can't remember what the quote was. It was in one of my comments, and it was something like the quote was that it's, you have to basically work your butt off for years and years, and there's this sliver of a chance of ever making. And I thought that's accurate, that you do have to develop your craft, but the limited opportunity is only true if you're thinking in terms of the Hollywood studio system, the very tippy top, the biggest budgets and the biggest kinds of stories. I would say that's only maybe 2% of the opportunity available to screenwriters. The opportunity is much more widely available if you start to look in places that are going to help you develop as a writer, rather than aim for the top, sort of do that lottery, throw the thing at the wall and see if it sticks. That is the sort of the mindset, the attitude that I think gets writers stuck along the way and prevents people from actually developing these skills. Because if you don't develop the skills, then when you have your moment, you're not going to be able to shine because you haven't developed your skills. We can see in the writing if you're up to speed or not. If you do develop those skills, there are places out there. There's the content machine has a voracious appetite. Audiences just never stop wanting new stories and new entertainment and new ideas. There are new streaming channels. There are new outlets for self-distribution, for whatever, where we can make films to connect with audiences. Now, that may not be your ultimate target, but that can certainly be a target that if you develop your skills within that realm, you get better and better at the craft, you eventually become actually quite capable of reaching that sort of top tier. So what I'm trying to do in this series is talk about all these kinds of things, really help you get where you're trying to go. Now, the first question that I have for you, the big question, the true question that will demonstrate whether or not you're actually moving forward is, how much writing did you do this week? How much action have you taken toward this goal? It's very easy to sit around and wait to write until you're inspired, until the muse hits you and you have a great idea and you sit down and you start blasting words onto the page. But the only way you're actually going to develop your skill and get better at it is by writing consistently. My whole thing is you need to take consistent, ongoing, daily action. You need to keep moving forward toward your goal. When you hit roadblocks or obstacles or things knock you down, well, those things are simply your limitations. Those things are simply the so that your head's bumping up against as far as you've gone before. Because once you hit that spot, once you realize, oh, I can't really go any further with my current knowledge, well, then you need to dig deeper into it and figure out what parts of it you're not quite connecting with. If you're an amazing writer and your screenplays are just perfect, and when people read them, they just fly through them, they turn those pages, and let's give you the benefit of the doubt and say you are professional level, best of the best screenwriter. And for some reason, when you send your scripts out into the world, nobody responds. Well, then that's the area that you need to improve at. Things like networking, things like understanding how to build relationships in a competitive industry, in an industry where people are often trying to vie for the attention of those few people who necessarily have to shut everyone out. If you understand that that's the missing piece, if indeed your writing level is extraordinary, and if indeed you're creating screenplays that genuinely deserve to be turned into movies, well, then that's what you need to focus on, right? I think part of the challenge is that as a writer, as the writers that I've met along the way, often find excuses in every little thing. Oh, I live too far away. Oh, I'm the wrong age. Oh, I'm the wrong gender. Oh, I'm telling the wrong kinds of stories. There is somebody out there who is aligned with the stories that you want to make, or with minor modifications to the kind of things that you write, you can quite easily align with the kinds of things that they want to make. So this can happen anywhere in the world. So if you find yourself not getting anywhere or struggling, you have to stop and sit down and go, what areas in this am I lacking? What are the missing pieces of the puzzle here? So this show, I want to try to cover as much of it as we can. I want to go as deep as we can. Some of it's going to be just conversations. I'll look through the chat. We'll answer questions that you may have. We'll discuss things that you may want to discuss. At some point, eventually, what I'd like to start doing is looking at material that people have written. You could send in something. I can go through it. I can show you sort of maybe objectively what someone who's on the receiving end of it might be thinking. There's a show, if you look back in the archives of this channel, called The Feedback Loop, where we did just that with 12 different writers. Each episode, we spent an hour on the first 3 pages of each different writer's material. They were on the phone, and we talked it through. So when they had this intention for the sentence, well, this is the way it reads to me. Oh, okay, we start to see that gap. So hopefully we can start doing that kind of thing. What we will eventually do with this show, the month of June here is more or less me trying to figure out the live streaming thing. For example, why everything that I tried to set up today didn't work. Why, when I clicked go at 2 o'clock promptly, it said, nope, you're not set up to go. Okay, then. So I have to spend a little time figuring this out. Rather than have a boring, hey, I'm doing this, and let's instead talk through screenwriting and talk about it all and see what we can come up with together. So who's all here today? Quick question. Who here, just pop in the chat, were you here last week? Are you planning to be here each week? Have you done any writing over the past week or so? Shane says, what happens when you keep moving forward but you don't get anywhere? Well, first of all, the journey is long. It's not something that screenwriting looks deceptively easy. It looks, because there are few words on the page, because the writing is sparse, writers often look at it like, I can knock out 100 pages in this format, no worries. But what they don't understand is that the key to writing really is you're implying more than you're actually writing. It's a little bit like poetry in that sense, in that in that you're going to use turns of phrase that will evoke more mental imagery, more visual experience than just those words themselves. So there's a lot in the white space. There's a lot in between, right? So because of that, it looks like we should be able to get further faster often. And so we write something and for some reason nobody's interested in it, or we can't get anyone even to read it to give us feedback. Well, all of these kinds of things are challenges that we can solve. We just have to take action and keep moving forward through that process. So you are getting somewhere, Shane, is the short answer. I know that I see the big smiley, so I know that was a joke. But if you feel like you're moving forward, and if you feel like you're working to move forward, but you don't seem to be making any progress, then you could quite possibly also be spinning in circles. A lot of times I find that writers, you read books or you listen to gurus or you go to seminars or classes or whatever. They all sort of teach a similar kind of idea. And so you keep focusing on those things, particularly the conventional wisdom stuff. You have to put this on this page and that on that page and have it turn like this. And the problem is, if you then focus on these kinds of things, you may continue to focus and dig and burrow and refine and piece together something that ultimately is one tiny little part of the big picture. The reason it might not be working might not be because of that thing that you're focusing on. It might actually be because you're missing all these other pieces, which nobody talked about, which keeps you spinning in that circle. So there are a number of reasons why we can feel like we're not getting anywhere. Let me see. What do we go? Kool-Aid Hummer watched the recording for last week. Thank you for doing that. Did you? Were there any questions that popped up? Anything sort of inspired you? One thing you will find, particularly with these first couple of weeks, more so than once I sort of get a handle on this. Initially, this is really free form. This is really just any questions that you have, anything you want to discuss or debate with me. I'm perfectly fine if you disagree with me on something. I get comments all the time. People disagree with me, or people going, you shouldn't be teaching screenwriting or whatever. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation and I can give you my perspective. So if you watch back on the recordings or any of the videos that I've made, there's like 80 or 100 hours of content on this channel made over 7 or 8 years. At the end of the day, if there's anything in there that you don't understand, I'm here to help. In fact, I read and reply sometimes in great detail to every comment on this channel because I want you to understand things. I want to help you with these things because the better you understand this stuff, the more likely you will be to develop these skills and be able to write something that someone like me, or maybe me, could go out and actually produce. If you don't know my story, I won't belabor it for the people that are here that do. I spent many years searching for material to produce as an independent producer, mid-level, low-level budgets. I was looking for something in the area of somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 budget range. And I put out a call for screenplays Australia-wide. And we got in 300 screenplays, and I vowed to read through all of them. When I did, I quickly realized that people just didn't really understand what this screenwriting thing is about. You can see who had read the books and were writing based on what all the gurus were teaching. And it's like, that's great, but I can't use that. You're not understanding where I'm at. So, for example, and sorry, I'm going to go off on little tangents like this, but one of the things when I started putting out a call for screenplays was, one of the things I noticed was that people would just go, hey, I see that you're looking for scripts, and they would just bombard me with 10 different projects or 10 different submission ideas. Like, if you don't like this one, what about this one? If you don't like this one, what about this one? And it's like, if you don't know which one to send me, you should not be sending me one, because ultimately you're basically taking all your projects and thinking that any producer would be a good producer for this project. And producers are just like writers. You have your sensibilities. You have the kind of stories that you want to write. You have the stories that you don't want to write, or the genres that you're really not interested in. Same thing with producers. Why would you ever send a script to a producer who's just not into that kind of a story? You don't want any producer. You want the producer that's right for your project. You want the producer that's aligned with it, that's in sync with what you're trying to make. And this was the grand challenge that I had, was that I couldn't find the material to produce. And so that's when I started teaching screenwriters. Ideally, I had this idea. Everyone had an idea for a movie. I said, do you know anyone who's got screenplays that we can try to find some scripts to produce? And people all had ideas. I got an idea for a movie. And they'd sort of tell me the 5-minute version of the 10-second encapsulation of their story. And I'd go, yeah, that's okay, that's fine, that's cool, but I can't do anything with that idea. So how do we go from that idea to not just a screenplay, but a screenplay that I can actually use, something I can package and go out and try to find investors for, and we could actually go make the film. I can see a marketing path to recoup the money so we could actually convince investors. I can see how we can attract some hot up-and-coming director or some name actor who's maybe willing to work on the cheap because it's such a great project. And I had a certain quality level that I was aspiring to at the time. And so I wasn't just going to go out and produce any old thing. And I wasn't going to go out and produce horror films, as no offense to horror film writers. And this is the grand challenge. So anyway, that's how we find ourselves here. I have spent the better part of 20-something years now teaching this stuff to writers. And the biggest obstacle that I see is not that writers don't have good ideas, not that they're not good with words or good at writing, not that they're not connected with people in the industry. The biggest challenge, the biggest problem that I see is that writers quit and writers give up at some point along the way, or they just don't continue to persist when you need to. The only way to develop these skills is to persist, is to keep taking action. Consistent, ongoing, daily action. It's why I set my system up the way that I did. It's why it will get you to the end. If you actually do it, it will get you to the end because it's designed to take you through that process. Whether you join me or not, you have to do it consistently. If you only write when you're inspired, you only write when I have a great idea, or oh yeah, and you sit down and you pound out 20 pages, 30 pages, whatever it is, you lose your momentum, or maybe you have a lot of momentum, you write a whole script, and then you're like, okay, cool, now what? I mean, that doesn't really develop a skill. You may be able to harness some magic by writing while inspired, but you're not going to be able to develop the skill to be able to do that consistently. And being able to do that consistently is what the industry needs of you. Because if you wrote a script and I go, this is a fantastic idea, it's a bit too big of a budget the way it's written. I wonder if we could scale a couple things back here and here. I wonder if we could change this character's gender because I know this actor who would be perfect for it if it was a female instead of a male. And I'm thinking about the logistics of putting the project together, or the logistics of what an investor might need. And so I'm thinking about all that stuff, and I come back to you and I say, can we make these kinds of changes? So many writers, it's almost like the default position of writers is like, that person's an idiot. They don't know what they're talking about. They're destroying the whole creative vibe or the point or the message that I'm trying to get across. And it's like, no, we're trying to see if we can tap into what your vision is, what you want to do, but in a way that's in sync with what we could actually make happen. Or maybe your idea simply sparked an idea in me that's not quite the story you were telling, but that I'm excited about the version that I see in my head. Do you want to come to where I'm at? And if you do, then do you have the skill to be able to do that? If all you ever do is write when you're inspired, well, then you're not developing the skills that are going to enable you to be able to write effectively, powerfully, creatively, imaginatively, profoundly, in a way that gives the audience a visceral experience, you're not going to be able to do that on demand. You're not going to be able to do that on command. You're not going to be able to do that in the moment spontaneously. And that's the skill that at least professional long-term screenwriters would need, because that's what we need of you. So eventually, at some point, once you've proven yourself as a screenwriter and you've got a filmography and all that sort of thing, what's going to happen is you're going to go into meetings and you will pitch projects. You won't be writing the scripts. You'll be pitching sort of projects that you've fully figured out and mapped out, and you're excited about this project. So rather than a spec, you'll pitch the project and they'll throw some ideas back at you, or they'll go, oh, well, okay, that's a cool idea, but what if we did it this way? Are you able to adapt on the fly? Are you able to develop something that is aligned with the producer, production company, studio, whomever's needs? That's really the skill. That's really what you're trying to develop as a screenwriter. It's so easy, especially in the early days when you're fixated on that one project idea that you have, or that movie that's burning a hole in your mind, or just up and come, like, how do I break in? How do I break through? You're fixated on your stories. And that's a good thing. You should be. That drives you. But at the end of the day, that's only part of the skill set that you need to have. And that wider skill set is, we can see it in your writing itself. So I don't know how I got onto that one, but we got onto that one because Kool-Aid Hummer said no, but I watched the recording. See, we're going off on whatever tangents we can. All right, let's see. Reaver Reap says, I got my first drafts for my 6-episode web series done because of you. Cool, thank you. Now just trying to figure out a good rewriting process. Well, I have the best one there is. So I spent years developing it. It's called the strengthen phase of the fast screenplay system. It's the hardest, most arduous part of the entire process, because rewriting always is. For those of you who are actually in fast screenplay and you're going through, and maybe that's the part that you just hate about the system. Yeah, totally. I understand. I would love for all these things to be easier. I would love for the whole process to be able to be like, all right, deet, and we all have an extraordinary project. But it just doesn't work that way, because there's a reason it doesn't work that way. Should I go in this direction or should I go in that direction? I'll come back to that in a second, if I remember. The rewrite process. Here's the thing. I used this analogy last week. I think it was last week, or maybe it was on an interview I was doing. There's a ball of yarn, and rewriting is, you go, oh, I need to take this thread out because it's not really working to the benefit of this ball of yarn. But as you pull it out, something over here gets mangled, and then you have to twist something around here to pull it to cover that back up. But then this part mushes in on the side, and so it's like every little thing you start changing has all these effects throughout your project. And so that's the fundamental difficulty of rewriting is, how do you know when it's done? How do you know when it's solid, which is the word I always use. How do you know that? But then also, how do you make changes that don't then subsequently unravel the rest of it? Or if they do, then still have a process by which you can go back and fix all that stuff. And the way that I did it was I broke it down, the entire rewrite process, into, you would look at your project like it has 6 levels. So the outer level is the big picture level, which is like the point or the purpose or what you're trying to get across. Sometimes it would be your theme or whatever is intellectually fascinating to you about the ideas, whatever it is you're trying to get across to people. Then inside of that is the whole story level, which I call it the whole story level because it's the whole story. What whole story, the whole of the story, what story are you going to tell to convey that big picture idea? So if you had a big picture idea, the example I always use, and apologies if I used it last week and we already know this, some of you, is it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. If that's your big picture idea, well, you could tell a story, one kind of story, one way, right? But you could also change the characters up and tell an entirely different story to still convey that big picture idea. So by breaking these things down into levels, and we did talk about it last week, so I don't want to go too deep into it, but there's big picture, there's the whole story, then there's the act level, which are the major movements of that whole story. So you could have a whole story, two star-crossed lovers who meet in an island somewhere, right? Like that's the love story that you're going to tell. Well, you could have it the first act, second act, third act, or however you want to break your story down. Could happen here, here, and here, but you could then change it to be over there and there and there, right? So those components that make up that whole story, those pieces can change, and you still have that whole story. You still have that big picture. Or maybe you have that whole story, but the point and the purpose that you're getting across, the theme or the message, maybe you want to change that once you've written a draft and you go, oh, actually, there's a better theme here. There's something deeper or more powerful. Well, you could keep the whole story level while changing that big picture level. But then the details, the act level, the scene level, the dialogue level, the experience level, those details, once you know what each of these levels do and what they are and how they interact with each other, when you make changes, you just need to know which level you're making those changes at. And then you need to understand how that impacts those other levels. So if you change your theme, for example, but you want to keep the basic storyline, and maybe you want to keep those major movements of the storyline, but some of the scenes are going to have to be quite different in order to convey that theme differently. What you end up with, make a long story short, with the strengthened phase, the rewrite process that I developed, what you end up with is a way to navigate that rewrite process. Most writers will sit down, they'll read through their script, they'll go, this scene isn't working. I got a better idea. Let's change it like this. And that's fine, sure, if that works for you. But if you really spent the time to develop that project in the first place, what happens is you're going to be making those changes to that ball of yarn that you may not even recognize how some of the changes that you're making in the scene will affect and impact other parts of your story. So your whole story could fall apart just because you thought you had a better idea for a scene here. So this is where writers always go astray. When you have those first ideas, I have an idea for a movie, I got a great scene in my mind, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna write my script. You sit down and you write your screenplay. That's the easy part. That's the fun part. You're inventing, you're creating, you're filling gaps and holes, and it's play. It's just pouring stuff onto the page. It's then once you have something on the page, taking that and making that something that's extraordinary, something that's a reader experience, that takes the reader on a journey where every little piece and every little moment builds the experience so that they really feel the emotional resonance of this, and they get the theme without you having to be heavy-handed about it, or they, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you can do some of that stuff spontaneously through the first draft, but I mean, ask any professional writer. The first draft happens relatively easily, and then you spend ungodly amounts of time, usually, rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. I heard someone the other day said, you're never going to have any script that you haven't rewritten 15 times. If you haven't rewritten it 15 times, it's probably not a professional caliber script. The guy that wrote Little Miss Sunshine is famous for saying he wrote that script in 3 days, and then he spent a year doing 100 rewrites. So, these are the rewrite process. The only way I believe to overcome those challenges is to actually treat it as a process, is to go through it, to learn, first of all, how to go through it systematically. And then once you've gone through it systematically, then to learn how to do that systematic process intuitively. And that's really what I built and what I've tried to set up. So if you're trying to figure out a good rewriting process, the strengthened phase of fast screenplay is, for my money, the best you'll find. up to you. You don't have to join us. It's all good. But one way or another, you have to figure out how to navigate those complexities. And before I built my system, and since, to be honest with you, I've never seen anyone go through it as meticulously as I have. It is arduous to learn how to do it, because you have to work meticulously at each level. You have to work meticulously to not only see how the level works in its own right, but then also to grasp how it's connected to the other levels. The first time through, it's a pain in the butt. It really is. And it's where most writers quit my system, because they don't see the end. They don't see the big picture. So they get lost in the challenge of it. But it's only by doing it that you experience it, that you get it, that you understand it. And so whatever approach to rewriting you're going to take, understand that it is the challenging part. I mean, ask any professional writer anywhere. It's a well-known fact. So Shane says, I was here last week. I wrote every day this week. Awesome, Shane. Planning to be here every week. Fantastic. Tobias says, here last week. Cool. Ray says, always have to be a part of this. Roland says, got here late last time, now here early and plan to watch every week. Fantastic. If you have any questions, anything you want to see specifically or know, let me know. I'm glad I found you right now. Next week I'll make it count. Fantastic. Let's see, what else? I find that I'm restrained. Tobias says, I find I'm restraining my imagination due to thinking of budgets, costs, etc. Should I just write and forget about the costs? There tends to be a misconception of what I do and what I teach, because the way that I teach screenwriting is I introduce the idea of budgets and cost limitations early on, largely because if you understand movie budgets, if you understand that writing a scene this way versus writing it this way would mean the difference between a producer going, oh, this is not a project for me, and oh, this is something we could probably manage, or I have no way I could fund that. This is achievable, or getting people to see those. If you understand the dynamics involved, if you understand what it's about, it will actually help you create ideas and stories that are things you're passionate about, but that are also created with that budget in mind. One of the biggest challenges that I have found is that when we started looking for screenplay scripts to produce, we would get scripts in of all budget levels. I would say, we're looking for $100,000 to $3 million Australian budget at the time. That's the budget levels that we were looking for. And so, we would accept anything and have a look at anything. And you'd get scripts in, and it was very clear that this is a $5 to $10 million budget project that this person is submitting. And it's very frustrating on the producer side of it to go, I like this project. I can't do anything with this project. By the time I'm ready to do something with this project, it's probably going to be off somewhere else, if it's a solid project. And so it's a big waste of time for everybody. It's what I was talking about earlier, where you think any producer will do. No, you need to find the right producer. So the reality of it is that you should not be thinking about budget. You should be writing the story that you're passionate about. You should be writing the story that's right for what you're trying to say. I'm a big believer that every story has a meaning. Every story has a purpose. Every story is trying to say something, whether you, the writer, understand what you're trying to say or not. If nothing else, the audience will be extracting meaning, extracting the point and the purpose. Their job as the audience is to sit there, first of all, to vicariously experience the story through the characters and to immerse into this fictional world, but then also to snap the pieces together as you go through the story to add up to what it is you're trying to say. Why did you make this movie? What was the point here, right? So if you don't know what that is, then they're going to piece it together. One way or another, there is a reason for this story. Now, if you create a story that cannot be made on a certain budget level, or cannot be, or needs a bigger budget level to be done effectively. I also see people trying to low budgetize projects that deserve a bigger budget, or the story itself calls for a bigger budget. You need big sweeping vistas. You need big sweeping crowd scenes and elaborate visual effects or whatever to tell this story in a way that's right for this story, for what you're trying to convey. As a writer, I believe your job really is to capture what you're trying to say in the most effective way for the audience you're trying to communicate with. And that involves budget when we're making movies. So the simple answer, I know I talk a lot for simple answers, but the simple answer is it really depends on where you are on your writing journey. I really believe that when you're first starting out, it's good to understand budget, but don't get limited by it. When you're first starting out, you're just learning principles, you're learning about the concepts of storytelling, you're learning how to do it. You really need a passion. You need something that you want to say, a story you're excited about. Who cares what the budget level is? Because the challenge of going through the process, the challenge is sticking it out. Anybody can write a first draft. But the challenge of going through that rewrite process, the challenge of going through the polishing phase, the challenge of getting it tested and getting that feedback and seeing that it's just not landing the way you had in mind. So taking that knowledge and going back and rewriting with all that in mind. That takes time. That's not easy. It can be personally challenging. You'll feel like people are judging you. You have to develop a thick skin for that. You have to build your actual skills. Are you including tension? Are you building suspense through the appropriate scenes? Is your dialogue crisp and punchy? Are you creating a world where the scene is bouncing off the world rather than just being a scene that could be anywhere in the world? Are you giving us a full experience? Developing all those skills, learning how to do all that stuff effectively takes time. It takes energy. And if when you go into it, you find yourself trying to create a project within budget constraints and parameters initially, it's a thing to think about that will get in the way of that creative passion for what you want to write. That said, if you write a $300 million film as your first script and you have not yet mastered all these skills required to do that effectively, well, the odds of that script selling are slim, right? So it's not something you can completely ignore, but it's something that you can't let anything interrupt your fuel source. You can't let anything get in the way of that motivation that you have, because I promise you, life will get in the way. People quit all the time. People do not follow through on this. The reason I'm sitting here talking to you today is because almost every writer that I've met along the way has quit. I've found a few that have done well. They've gone off somewhere else because I'm not ready for them yet, because I'm still trying to help all these writers and build something, right? So alignment is a tricky thing. You got to be in the right place at the right time. So once you have a handle on storytelling, once you have a handle on the dynamics involved and you want to sort of up your game, put on some production limitations, put on some budgetary restrictions. It's going to force a creativity in your imagination. You're going to have to think of, okay, I had this idea for this sprawling scene. What if I had to do this movie on this tiny little budget here? How would I convey thematically or reveal character or come up with some engaging scene that is constricted in location or constricted with number of actors or whatever other budgetary ways you're going to solve the challenges. Also, in addition to that, we live in a time that is we have more and more power to do bigger and bigger things at lower and lower cost. So indie films today can can look pretty amazing with the tools that we have to make things at home. Even the visual effects tools with After Effects alone, we can make pretty much anything we can imagine. It's going to take time, and somebody has to invest that time, which is why there's that time money connection there. But ultimately, we can probably do things that at one time we would have wanted to restrict our choices based on budget, that today we might be able to find ways to do some of those seemingly bigger budget things. So unless you understand really some of the dynamics of all that, I would really not constrain myself. I'd really, it's important. The most important thing in my experience, and keep in mind, I've been trying to teach writers now for 22 years. And so I've calculated, I've interacted with somewhere between 10 and 15,000 writers over the years. 99% quit. Why do they quit? That's been my biggest challenge over the years. And the reason they quit is they run out of fuel. There's something about it that disheartens them or diminishes them. Somebody says something negative about what they've written, or just everybody's in their ear telling you it's impossible. And at a certain point, because it's hard, because it takes a long time to develop the skills, you know what? Everybody's probably right anyway. This isn't a real thing. I'm just going to give up on this. And then meanwhile, there's people like me out there going, I can't find anything, because nobody will develop those skills and create stuff that's in sync with what I need at the moment that I need it, right? So follow your passion. Tell the stories that you want to tell, regardless of budget, at least early on, until you get a better sense of how budget works and how those things impact upon the stories that you write. One of the reasons that I want to build my indie film studio is because writers generally do not have a very solid grasp of these very things. And it's my belief that the best way for you to understand budgetary considerations is to write something that gets produced, which is easier said than done. I'm sure everyone here goes, yeah, great, sign me up. But how do we get you from there to there? Well, we need you to have a certain base level of skill before you can write something that we can go out and make. It's not like painting where you buy an easel and some paints and you can start doing it. Making movies, even if you're doing it on super low budget with digital SLR cameras, or right, you're going to edit it on your computer at home. Even if you're doing it like that, it's going to take a lot of time. You're going to need multiple people involved. Just the logistics of that, stretch it out. It becomes an investment one way or another, of time or of money. And so we really need to make sure that the story is as good as it can be before we get to that point. So focusing on those skills first is probably the way to go. That was a very, very long answer to a pretty straightforward question. Let's see. Shane says, I found that the more I learned about screenwriting, I read all the books, took all the courses, I became blocked. Trying to satisfy all these story requirements seemed impossible. It's true, because I think one of the big challenges, and I've probably said this before, but one of the big challenges of screenwriting is that there's no such thing as right or wrong. There's no right way to do it. There's no, despite what some gurus would have you believe, there is no formula. There are formulas, but those formulas are not applicable to all stories. And in many cases, those formulas are not conducive to your own creative originality. The best stories are going to be the stories that take us on a journey we've never experienced before. That doesn't have to be a hero's journey. That doesn't have to be the monomyth. All that. It doesn't have to be that. It can be something completely different. But if all you're taught through all the books is it has to be done this way, or well, don't forget this detail, don't forget that detail, don't forget that detail. It can be very debilitating for no net benefit. The key always is to just write, is to keep moving forward, is to take action consistently. Now, my system would probably fit that description to the casual observer, because we cover like 200 to 300 different skills throughout the system. It builds, so you need to have completed these steps in order to understand these steps and then build on those skills, so that by the time you get to the end, you've built, and you get to pro level by the end. That's hard. So it's like, if you overthink it, if you think you have to perfect every step along the way, then yeah, you're gonna quit. You're going to be overwhelmed by it. The way I designed it, or the way I intended to design it, I'm not sure that everyone gets this idea, is that you don't worry about what happened before. You focus on this step today, right? So if you immerse into this step today, then you move forward, and in that way you move through the entire process, and you have that experience of the whole process. Then once you have that experience of the whole process, you can go back and start to do that more and more intuitively. You can dig deeper into it. You can zoom in on those specifics because you have the whole picture. But so many writers are like, I have to perfect it every step of the way. I don't know that that's necessarily the books or the gurus or the teacher's faults. I think that's just the nature of the complexity of what we're trying to do. Because it's a wide open canvas, there really are an enormous variety of possibilities. I would say unlimited possibilities. I know there are some people that say there's only 6 stories or 12 stories. Or just, okay. I mean, they may be talking about certain story frameworks, but at the end of the day, you could tell a story that we've never seen before and break the mold. You could be pedantic and say, well, it's still going to break down into... There's setup and payoff. That's the dynamic underneath all of it. So if you want to assume that setup payoff is a formula, then okay, we could argue there's only one story. We set something up and then we pay it off. But I would argue that that's a dynamic, and you can use setup payoff in hundreds of different ways. So don't, bringing it back to the question, when you get blocked because you're thinking about all these rules or all the demands or all the different requirements, you're thinking that those requirements are going to make or break your project. So if a teacher teaches you something, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to perfect that thing. That thing is just fodder for the brain, for the creative subconscious, where you're going to put all the things that you learn and put all the skills that you develop, and then you're going to be able to go through the process. If you, it's like, an analogy I would have is playing piano. I don't know if you've ever played the piano, but when I was a kid, I used to play the piano, and what I always found was I could learn, you learn it very consciously. You learn it very deliberately. This key's here and it makes that sound, and this combination makes that sound. And if I go really fast like this, it makes that sound. But this with that doesn't work. And it's very, very deliberate. The better you get at it, the less you can think about the individual keys. If you're playing a recital or in a performance of some sort, and you're playing the keys and you're just going away with it, if you start to think about, okay, what happened after this part? No, that thinking of it is going to screw it up. That's what's going to jumble. That's going to make the whole thing fall apart. At a certain point, you have to play where it just sort of washes over you, and it becomes this fluid flow, this instinctive, intuitive kind of creativity. And when you're inspired to write and you tap into that and you just sort of pour words onto the page, yes, you are indeed tapping into that. Writing's a little different to playing the piano, because playing the piano is a live experience. We hear the piano and then it's gone. When you write, they are for words on the page that someone is going to read those words back to have a flow experience of their own. So it's not about how you flow it onto the page. It's about how it flows off the page into the reader's imagination. So the more you fixate on the details of how you make that happen, the more like a piano player you can jumble up the experience of writing, or the experience of creating something that is an enjoyable read. So my solution to that is do fast screenplay where it's 1 step per day, and don't worry about the rest of the system. Don't worry about selling your script. Don't worry about getting an agent. Worry about today's action. Immerse into today's action. When you're done with today's action, tomorrow, immerse into today's action, right? So in that way, you're not worried about the whole thing. It's getting there. It's filling the brain. If you just focus on, the steps in fast, I know you're in fast, which is why I'm saying that to Shane. The steps in fast are designed to be learned that way. Immerse into it today. Focus on today. Don't focus on the big picture. Don't focus on the whole thing. That stuff will come by focusing on each step. So hopefully it will help you overcome that block. Let me know. I'll keep reading and see if you've started talking about something else. Let's see. Daria says, I've been working on a story for 6 years now, and the first draft was done maybe in 6 months on and off, but most of my time goes into developing the story. It doesn't work, so I keep fine-tuning. Well, so that's okay. That's not necessarily a problem. If you're... So if you made a first draft, but now you're continuing to develop the story, technically you could be rewriting or you could be redeveloping. So the reality of, there's a thing in screenwriting called a page one rewrite. So if you send a script into a production company or something and they like the idea, but you kind of have to start over from scratch, it's called a page one rewrite. Like, throw this whole one out and try again, basically. That's not actually rewriting. That is redeveloping based on that initial idea. So the way I teach screenwriting is it's process based. So it really, we start at the beginning. So we start with that idea. We workshop the idea. We try to find the best possible expression of that idea. We test to see what the how it affects a potential audience, and we sort of settle on an idea, and then we grow that idea. We develop bits and pieces of it, and it sort of grow it into a story. It's possible that when you write the first draft, you will take the story in a whole new direction, or it's possible that through the writing of a draft, you'll find things that you didn't like about the story. So when I talked about rewriting earlier in this sort of 6 levels of the rewrite process, that is for if you have the story and you know that you're trying to improve that story. Sometimes what you'll find is, now we basically have to start again with the things that we've learned at that point. For my system, for anyone who's going through my system, I recommend learning the whole thing first before you ever do that. But ultimately, you will be doing that. Like, writers will do that. That's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're spending 6 years on a single project and you're still developing and you think that it doesn't work, when I read that, I think, you're probably missing the tools that would enable you to make it work. And so, I'm always going to suggest, doing something like fast screenplay, or stay here and ask me questions and let's dig into what's not working on your project. So, fine tuning is a word that I apply to the tweak phase, which is the polishing phase. I would suggest not fine tuning until you have a solid story. So once you have a solid story, then you start going in and fine-tuning that story. So you know that it works, you know that the characters work, you know that the thing builds. At every step of the writing process, you will be making changes that will then require you to go back and change other things. This is the fundamental challenge of writing, is once you pull that piece of string over here, it's going to affect the rest of the ball somewhere. The ball of yarn analogy that I'm going to belabor to death apparently today. But once you make that change, it will have an effect. So this is why I believe that my approach, this process-driven approach, is more powerful, because once you understand the entire process and where these little bits and pieces fall onto the process, it's easy to jump back to over here and resume from there. You don't necessarily have to go all the way back to the beginning for a page one rewrite. You might just go back into sort of the middle here, and so If you've been struggling at a single project for 6 years and you're continually trying to refine it, my one hesitation would be that it's quite possible that you're aiming for a perfection that your skill level is not quite yet ready for. And so what I would probably recommend is to try to finish that project as best you can, as quickly as you can, and then start another project that you can apply the skills that you've learned and the principles and ideas that you've been to. First of all, it'll give you some distance between that project. If you finish a project or finish a draft of a project and go, okay, well, that's good for now, I'm gonna start on something new. And then you come back to that project 6 months or a year later, you're going to see that project in a whole new way. You will see it with more objectivity than is possible if you've been tinkering with it for 6 years. So again, if you approach it from a process-based approach, what happens is you can set something down, and then when you come back, you can just plug it right back into the process wherever you were. So that's probably what I would suggest to you if that helps. Let me know in the comments, and we'll come back to it. Shane says, Shane's talking to Tobias there. What else? Who we got? Suratha, how are you? I've been stuck in the strength and phase for a few years now. See, that's because you're overthinking it. But I am progressing toward crossing it this time. Letting go of my perfectionism has been the biggest obstacle for me. So the reason we all want, sorry, let me have a quick. The reason we all have this perfectionism is the human mind has this real fear of being wrong or being shamed or being perceived to be the fool or the idiot, the village idiot, right? Like, so we don't want to put something on the page that when we send it out into the world, people are going to laugh at. And so what we tend to do is we judge ourselves prematurely before we ever even make the thing in the first place, so that our brain is trying to protect us from that humiliation, right? The problem is this: in order to get the thing created, we have to go through the mud. Like when you have an idea in your head for a movie or whatever, you have this idea in your head and you see this scene and it would be a great scene, and you can imagine the ending sequence and you're thinking about the actor coming in, your favorite actor saying this line and the other, whatever you're imagining for your scene, right? The problem is that you're seeing this scene, you're seeing that scene, you're seeing that scene, and your brain is going, well, I don't know what happens in the middle, but something cool is going to go in there and this is going to be an awesome story. And so in your brain, this idea feels fantastic. And this idea feels like it's going to change the world. And it just feels like, how could anyone not love this project? When you sit down to start writing it, you have that maybe a cool scene. You have those characters. You can't see them, though, on the page. So you can't really word it very well. So it doesn't have the same effect as words. Oh, and by the way, there's all these pages in the middle that I didn't really know what was going to go there. My brain said something great's going to go there, but now that I'm sitting here, it's not really great. So you see it, and it's kind of this half jumbled mess of it's really not very good. And then your judgment brain, your critic voice, as I call it, says, "See, you're no good. This is you. You're not cut out for this. What are you doing? Stop. Go do something else with your life, because you're only going to embarrass yourself. You're only going to humiliate yourself." The reality is, you have to put those little pieces on the page so that you can see what needs to fill in between them. That's part of the process. That's part of doing it. If you don't put anything on the page because you don't know what to fill in between it, well, you're never going to develop those skills. You really have to turn the critic voice off while you're going through the process. There are parts of the process that require the critic voice. And those are the parts, I highlight them very clearly. This is the part where be as judgmental as you want to be. There's probably only, probably only maybe 10% of the steps in my system that require that. The rest of it is pure creativity. That's not the way writers experience it, though. Writers are forever judging themselves. Even though I told them early on, stop that, they still do. We still do. It's natural. It's human to do that. But the more you develop your skills in this craft, the more you realize that premature judgment of yourself is unnecessary. It gets in your way for no real good reason. You should write garbage. You should write, I get a little more, I use a slightly more explicit, profane word. You must write crap. There's another word I use. That's what you have to do. You think of it in terms of, I need to get garbage onto the page. Writing is not the part where you put it on the page. Writing is the part where you fix it and turn it into something. No one will ever judge that first putting it on the page because you're never going to show anybody that. You're going to show them the writing that you've done after you've gone through and fixed it and polished it and improved it and turned it into something better than that initial draft. So judge away at the early stuff. The judgment means nothing. I'm not going to show anybody this. It's about seeing what my ideas are. I really believe that writing is a process of discovery. It's an iterative process, and it's a process of discovery. When you sit down to start writing your project, I guarantee you, the idea that you have in your head is not going to be the final project. Guaranteed. I would say 100% of the time. If it is, you're not challenging yourself enough. Because as you write and as you explore those ideas or those scenes or those characters or this world or whatever it is, as you explore that stuff, you will be discovering something bigger, something broader, something further. You're going deeper into it. So if you're judging the early stuff, then you're really not looking at the early stuff for what it actually is, which is a stepping stone to the thing that you want to write and the place that you want to go. So perfectionism is a big thing. We all face it. It's not unique to any human being on the planet. There are some of us that are a little more perfectionist than others, but we all have it in some way to some degree. So don't worry about it too much. Just what I would suggest to you, and I know that if you've been struggling at that phase for a few years, it's simply because you're not just doing the steps. The steps are designed to be done at a certain pace. If you're not doing them at that pace, you're overthinking it. Learn the process and then go back and use the process. Go back and master the process. And that's how you're going to get good at it. Imagine this. If you spend 3 years, 4 years, 6 years learning that for the first time, wouldn't it have been easier just to learn it in a few months and then start reworking it and getting better and getting better? In that same amount of time, you can go vastly further. So not to in any way admonish you for it, just to try to inspire you to go easier on yourself. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do some of this stuff. So keep at it. You're doing okay. I think rewriting is the main reason why I haven't progressed in my career, says Shane. Yeah, probably. I'm always on to the next exciting idea. This is the danger for writers, because we all have. Sorry, my AC is not working today. We all have lots of ideas, and when you have an idea in your head and it doesn't have the full shape to it, it's exciting. It can be anything. It can be as great as you dream it will be. It's not until, again, you start putting it on the page and you start seeing its flaws that you go, oh, maybe it's not as great as it could be. The story I always used to tell in the beginning of my weekend workshops when I first started running them in Sydney was, what I used to do is I'd go, I have a great idea for a story. And I'd sit down and start banging it out. I'd get like 20, maybe 30 pages into it and I go, I'm not really so good at I've got a better idea, right? And you get 20 or 30 pages into that one, and you sort of go, yeah, no, I'm not crazy about this one either. I got a better idea, right? Go back into the next one. The problem is all you're really doing is all you're really doing is the very first part of tapping into what your ideas are. The very first part of taking something amorphous in your brain and trying to put it on the page. But as soon as it's not perfect, and by the way, you're judging it against movies that you've seen, against screenplays that you've read, which people have refined hundreds of times. And your first attempt, you're holding it up against that and going, this is terrible. I'm not as good as that, so I'm not good. That was your first attempt. If all we ever do is just sit there and go over the ideas that are in our head, we're not going to get very far with this. If there was one thing that I could try to convey to writers is focus on learning how to rewrite. If you can master the art of rewriting, you master screenwriting. Because if you think about it, if you could take any weak draft and turn it into a solid, extraordinary story, and then polish it into a compelling page-turner screenplay. If you could take any draft and turn it into that, the world's your oyster. But most people are not focused on that skill set. They're focused on that one idea they have in their head, that one idea that they think is their lottery ticket, that one idea that, oh, once I get this in the hands of the right producer, I'm off and away, and I'm going to make $1 million out of this. It doesn't work like that until you have this skill set. And if you have this skill set, you can take any idea that's in your head and turn it into a compelling page-turner screenplay. So I know that may be the hardest part of the process, but that is the part that's going to change, that's going to take a writer from unproduced to produced. Let's see. John says, hello from Brazil. Hi, Brazil. I love Brazil. First time here on the channel. Hello, Aaron Collins, the real Aaron Collins, I might add. Welcome. I hope you are enjoying it. And if you have any questions, let me know. Let's see. Budget forces you into a box that you have to try to think out of, I guess. No. So Tobias, going back a little bit to the budget conversation, which I know you probably said that while that conversation was happening. The budget does not force you into a box. The key is, the way I see it anyway, the key is to write stories that are best told at that budget level. Think of alignment, which we talked about last week. Alignment is basically, for those who are new, there's some new people here. One of my fundamental ideas that I believe and that I promote and that I teach is that there's only one way you will ever sell a screenplay, and that is if your project, your script, your story is aligned with the immediate needs of at least one producer. So there's one producer out there who reads your script and goes, oh my God, I want to make that. Or, oh my God, I see dollar signs in that, right? Or, oh my God, if they just change this and this and this, I want to make that, right? So that alignment is when you get the yes. That alignment is the deal. Alignment doesn't happen if you've written a big budget project and I'm looking for a low budget project, or vice versa. You write a low budget thing and I'm, looking for my big studio multiplex thing. Sorry, that's not gonna work. So that's why it's not a one producer fits all thing. You have to find the person that's right for your project, the one that's aligned with your project. Well, budget is I think story is the same way. So if you're telling a big budget story in a low budget way, you're not really servicing the story effectively. You can take the same theme, again, that sort of big picture level of our 6 layers. You can take that big picture layer and say, well, this is the theme I want to get across. This is the idea I want to get across. But because we're doing it at a lower budget, we're going to change the whole story level a bit. We're going to change how the story plays out. And we're going to play it out in a way that is served best by the lower budget. And that could be things like, it's not necessarily recommending it today, but there was a whole genre for a long time of the found footage film where somebody finds a camera and oh my God, what did this filmmaker, Blair Witch was the sort of big film that made that genre successful for far longer than it should have been. But the idea is by doing that, we can make a movie on effectively home video cameras, and we shrink our budget tremendously, right? So the story, the way they told the story was served best by telling it in this low budget way, right? So they created the story around this budget limitation, or this idea that they had for their production, or I don't know the story behind it, but it was an idea that was very much aligned with the budget. That's an extreme example, but if you were, if you have a low budget, or you're trying to write for a lower budget, then if you understand how budget works, you can create story that is the thing that you want to say, that is in sync with your voice and your passion. You can create that in a way that is best served by the low budget. So I think thinking of it as putting you in a box is forever going to limit how effective your writing can be at that kind of a budget level. Hope that makes sense. Hi, Matthew. Matthew said hi all. So Tobias said, thank you. That's helpful. I guess each script you write is more of a demonstration of what the writer can do rather than a product in itself. No, at the end of the day, a screenplay should be a film in its own right. At the end of the day, when you're as a screenwriter, every script is going to, it's like a portfolio. Every script is going to show what you can do. So if you have let's imagine you have a great script and you submit it to somebody like me when I was looking for scripts, and I get the script in and I go, wow, this is a cool idea. This is not right for me, but it's a cool idea and this is really well written. Then I may, and I have, followed up with the writer and said, hey, so I really like your writing. This one's not right for us, but do you have any other projects? I'd be curious to see what else you've written. And then if they could send something else in. If you have those other projects ready to go, then it becomes more possibility of making those connections and making those deals. So it's not just a demonstration, but every screenplay should be able to be a film. Otherwise, it's just destined to be a writing sample, or end up on your bookshelf somewhere. But they are all a demonstration of what you can do. So it's not an either or. It really is a both situation. Let's see. I'm doing The Practice by Seth Godin, and it has had a huge impact with me on how to trust the process. I have not read that, but cool. Let's see. As a musician, Ray says, as a musician, going with the flow is the same. Oh, is the going with the flow, writing with the flow? Absolutely. Tobias said, I've joined your system, downloaded step 1, shall continue with it? Most certainly. Fantastic. I'm really not here to pitch the system. I can't help. It's basically impossible for me to talk about what I have learned and what I have figured out about the craft without kind of talking about fast screenplay a bit. So I hope that doesn't come across to non-fast screenplay people as a pitch of some sort. What I did was I sat down and I said, writers have good ideas. I'm looking not just for good ideas and not just for screenplays. I'm looking for screenplays we can actually say yes to and go out and produce. How do I get a writer from here to here? And I sat down and I mapped it out. There's 7 distinct phases of that process. I turned those phases into a series of action steps so that writers can go through that process. Now, whether you go through Fast Screenplay or you go do it on your own, you still will need to go through all 7 of those phases. You may take a different set of steps to go through them. You may jumble them around a bit. If you're doing it on your own, you're going to learn or not learn, or it'll take longer to figure it out just by nature of the fact that everything is trial and error. So taking you through that process is what I built. But understand this, if you aren't joining us, the process is the process. I built a system out of the process, but the process itself is the process. Everyone has ideas. We all have to take those ideas and shape those, what I call focus those, into a story, turn it into a story plan, right? Then all of us, once we have that, have to sit down and blast it onto the page, right? And then all of us, once we have it on the page, have to go through and strengthen that and make it solid, do the rewriting of it. Once we've done that, all of us have to go through and meticulously shape the words so that we have a page turner reader experience. And then all of us have to send it out into the world and make sure that it lands with the reader the way we intend for it to. And if it doesn't, to take that feedback and rework that project until it does, either until they're happy or until we're happy, or hopefully both. And then once we have that project that we know lands the way we want it to land, every single one of us is going to have to go find the right person and figure out how to hook them, draw them in, get them excited about the project. And then when we deliver on that script, exceed their expectations. So whether you ever join Fast Screenplay or not is up to you, but you're going to have to learn those phases. You're going to have to learn and master that. And the more intuitive you can become at this whole process, the more it can just become a sort of second nature part of your skill set, the more you will be able to, the further you'll be able to get with it. So anyway, I'm always so reluctant to talk about that stuff. But anyway, it's good. Let's see. Great information. Aaron is joining from LA. Cool. I'm in LA these days myself. Find the worst judges are friends and family who don't understand all the writing, what they mostly see as a mad hobby that leads nowhere. Yeah, look, at the end of the day, it really does help if you have supportive people around you, people who are, people who understand that it's very doable, right? I grew up here in LA, and so, I started acting when I was 12 years old. So, and I, at that point, already had many people in my life who were already in the film industry. So to me, it was never a weird thing. It was never something far off and distant. And it wasn't until I moved to Australia that, I knew this group of people that were sort of in the acting community, start expanding beyond that even a little bit, and just people have no idea. And the idea of, hey, do you have any ideas for movies or TV projects, or is there something that you have an idea that you would like to turn into a movie? Like, people would just be like, what? Like, I don't even know. You could be talking another language right now. I don't know what you're talking about. I remember being in a cab ride to a workshop I was doing in Melbourne, and he was like, "So what are you here for?" I was like, "Oh, I'm running a workshop." And he goes, "Oh, what's it about?" I said, "Oh, it's about screenwriting." He's like, "What is that?" And he was like, and then I explained it's like writing movies, and he was like, "What do you mean writing movies?" Like, he could not get his head around the idea that movies were written before they were made. And it's just, that's much of the reality. So you can't necessarily hold it against your friends or family who think this is a crazy thing to do, or think this is wildly dreaming that this is never actually possible. This is so much more possible than you think. This is so much more achievable and accessible, particularly today, even 10 times more so today than when I started teaching this stuff in 1999. But back then, it was already infinitely achievable. So today, it's like there's like an ocean of content to be made. And if you develop the skills, even if those people are not interested in screenplays, or if you reached out to them, they said, yeah, maybe they will say they're not interested. But if you write something extraordinary and you reach out to those people who are already making content to help them lift their game, you can invent connections today. You can invent opportunity today because of the accessibility of the tools that we make all this stuff with. I'm here, in this is a home studio right here. I've got a nice big light. I've got my equipment. I've got this new thing that was supposed to work. Caught it a little bit too late. And so this live stream isn't quite as polished as I would want it to be. But the fact is, next week, I'm going to be cutting to this and cutting to that, and we'll have different camera angles, and I'll show you script pages and all this kind of cool stuff. Like, that was a TV studio years ago when I first started teaching this, that you couldn't do that stuff. Now anyone can do it. So now it becomes a question of, can you tell a compelling story? Can you tell a great story that an audience gets excited about and wants to watch and will come see the low budget project or the indie film or what have you, because your hook is so strong, your characters are so compelling. It's a story on a topic that big Hollywood movies don't make these topics. So wow, fantastic, right? The opportunity is so endless that it's really, really hard when the people in your life are not supportive of it and are not encouraging of it, because it really, like I said earlier, it really demands fuel. You need the passion, and you need that passion to persist. And so when you have the negative voices in your life that are saying, this is stupid, don't persist, that's yet an even harder thing to overcome. And you need even more fuel to push against it, right? It's like an inertia thing, like a race car. You've got to go even, or a spaceship trying to leave the Earth's atmosphere. It just needs to go even harder to break through that sort of pressing limitation. The thing that I would say is cut them some slack, because they don't know. They don't understand the opportunity that's available today. They don't understand why you're passionate about the stories that you're passionate about. If they knew, if they understood, if they could see it, feel it on the inside, they would, if not do it themselves, they would at least be supportive of you doing it. If they love you, if they care about you. And I think often that love and that care that people have is that they don't want you to be humiliated. Then they don't want you to go waste your life in pursuit of something that's really not possible. But it is possible. So you just have to have that inner fuel to push against that. It's absolutely essential. It's the only thing that keeps me going sometimes. I have supportive people in my life, but man, I've needed a lot of fuel to keep going, to keep trying to teach this stuff when people quit all the time. Or people, no offense to you guys who we talked to earlier, but you have so much perfectionism that you just stop moving forward. And I'm like, if you just kept moving forward, we'd be making films together by now. But it's like, keep going. So what keeps me going? It's that fuel. It's that passion. It's I know enough to know that giving up would be the foolish thing to do. That giving up would be the unsensible thing to do, right? It's persisting that is valuable, as long as you're persisting and improving all the time. If all you're doing is spinning in circles, yeah, you're going to burn yourself out, and it's not going to work out. If you're continuously improving, well, then you're actually moving forward. Going back to the title of this, the title of this episode, keep moving forward. That's what I mean by that. You have to keep improving. You have to just day by day, chipping away at it, not just doing busy work, but actually doing work that's getting you better, that's getting you closer to your target. That's the key. That's the goal. Let's see. Okay, Sharatha says, requiring every answer at every step of the way also kills the momentum. As I move forward, every step brings in new questions and possibilities, which overwhelms me. There's no need for every answer at every step of the way. I hope you're just let me know if that makes sense. I mean, every step brings in new questions, of course, and new possibilities, of course. But if you just focus on today's, then you're moving forward. Here's the thing. And I know this is a challenging part of my systems design and why some people quit. But it grows with each step, right? Here's the thing. In all of life, I have a toddler right now, right? He's learning he knows how to walk now. He knows how to talk. He tries to talk to Alexa and she doesn't understand him half the time. And you can see him trying to get those words out and he doesn't quite have it. Every day he's building something new on his knowledge. He's not focused on perfecting every little detail of it. He's just focused on improving. And by just focusing on that thing that he wants to improve today, he moves forward down the path of it, right? He gets closer to it. He develops those skills. It's a bit the same with writing. As you go through the process, or whatever process others are taking through this, as you develop new skills, if you have to perfect the earlier skills, then you're thinking about it wrong. All you want to do is keep improving. It's not about perfecting anything. None of it has to be perfected. None of it's a rule. None of it's a requirement. You could tell a story that had no central character. Now, I know that there are going to be screenwriting gurus out there, or teachers or commenters on the YouTube pages that are going to go, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You can't have a movie without a central character. Of course you can. It would be a non-traditional story. That's possible. That can be done. The question is, can you do that effectively? And maybe you can find a way to do that effectively. So the rule of mastering the character, or the character's wants versus their needs, or the whatever other little thing that you're stuck upon, is getting fixated on the wrong thing. What we're trying to do through FAST, and probably anybody who's trying to teach you screenwriting, is they want you to understand the principles so you can go and start to apply the principles in your own unique way. For me, it's not about follow these rules. It's about understand that there's all these principles involved. Just sample them, try them out, build them. As you just keep moving forward, you will by nature of the design of the thing, you will experience them. You will do those things. And so it's by doing them that we learn how to do it. The only way you will learn how to write a screenplay is by writing a screenplay, not by thinking about it, not by mapping it out, by writing a screenplay. The only way you will learn rewriting is by rewriting a screenplay, polishing a screenplay, testing and using feedback from a screenplay, selling a screenplay, producing a screenplay into a movie. The only way you will ever learn that stuff is by doing it. So don't let it become an academic exercise, right? That if you make it about the academics of it. And yes, there will be critics out there who are going to judge you on those things. That's later. We'll get to all that stuff. That's not for now. That's not for the creative part of the process. That's not for learning how to do it. Learning how to do it is, man, just do it. Just keep moving forward. So anyway, Roland says, sorry to change the subject, but when writing fight scenes, how much detail is too much detail? So I would have cut to the script that I had on my page, but my live stream, I tried a different way of live streaming today, and when I hit go, it didn't start. So I had to revert to what we did last week. I'll figure it out for next week. But I would show you the page so you can see. One page is roughly equivalent to 1 minute of screen time. So if you imagine a fight scene that lasts, say, a minute of screen time, you're going to have probably 1 page worth of action description of that scene. Now, the way you want to write that scene is you want to write it in a very visual way. So, I don't know, Jason, swipes at Tom and cracks him across the jaw. His head goes spinning, or as his head spins, he slams into the vase with the ashes of the late mother and it spills on the ground. Whatever your action scene is, I'm not going to try to create one right now. But the point is that you want to describe it in that way. What are we seeing? With all screenwriting, imagine that as we're reading the screenplay, we're sitting in a theater, and as we're reading the screenplay, we're watching the movie on the screen in our mind, right? So you can think of screenwriting as cinema on the page. So as we read it, we should be imagining the movie. So when you are describing an action scene, you don't ever want to say, and I've seen this a lot, a car chase ensues and the characters are, the guy speeds off. So I'm left to imagine a chase scene, right? Which I can do. And if you hire a good stunt coordinator, yeah, of course they can probably design one too. But you want to design the chase scene or the car crash or whatever it is in a way that serves your story, that moves your narrative forward, that maybe reveals some piece of detail we didn't know somewhere. Like it should be germane to the story. It shouldn't be just something you could pluck out and put any other random string of action words in there, right? It should be right for this project. So you really want to design what those things are going to be, and then you want to make sure that you're conveying the visuals. Think of looking through a camera at what we're watching. The car screeches across and slams into the bus or whatever, right? So So if you imagine that your action scene is going to be a minute or so long, it's going to take about one page. In fact, it starts in the middle of the page, that goes down about halfway down the next page. It's kind of that. In proper screenplay format, which you're not going to want more than like 3 lines of text in any paragraph. You're going to want to space things out and give visual gaps, so there's a bit of white space that makes it easy for us to read, so it reads quickly. It's not one big chunky block of text. All those kinds of things, which we'll get into probably as we go further into this. We'll probably do an episode specifically on the language of screenplays and that kind of thing. But you don't necessarily want to go into every little detail. It's not so much about detail. It's about. I always say screenwriting is not. The screenwriter shouldn't really tell us every little thing about the story. The writer should put as few words as possible that enable the reader to picture the movie that you see in your imagination, right? So how sparsely can you put the words on the page so it's a fast read, so it's something that is, they pick it up, they can get through it quickly, and it's exciting, and they're drawn to it throughout. You want that experience, but as they're reading it, you want the pictures in their mind to be alive. So that can happen, for some things it's very sparse, very utilitarian. For things like an action scene, I think you're going to want to create something that is really pulling us into the visceral experience and the visceral nature of the action. I hope that helps. If not, ask a follow-up. That's totally cool too. Happy to line, I'm easy. Dari says, for me, it's been more like redeveloping page 1 rewrite, as you said. Moving on is great advice. Thank you. Maybe we'll come back to it later on. I think that would be a good thing. Shane says, topic often struggle writing heroes with strong singular story goals. I find the goals change and evolve during the stories. Notice lots of Oscar-winning scripts don't have heroes with strong goals. Well, so this is the thing. So a lot of the screenwriting gurus and the hero's journey and all this stuff it's built around a hero-driven story. For those who don't know, a hero is a character whose actions dictate the plot. So that the character will get a flat tire in their car, and then because they got a flat tire in the car, they met this other person who got them involved, swept up in this bank heist or whatever, right? So it's their actions, the choices they make, that dictate the twists and turns of the plot. A hero-driven story is also a story where the central character is the character through whom we, the audience, experience the story. So there's always a character through whom we experience the story. The example I always give is The Shawshank Redemption, which has a hero or a main character and a protagonist. So the protagonist is the character whose actions twist and turn the story. That character in The Shawshank Redemption is Andy. The main character is the character whose eyes we see the story through. That character in Shawshank Redemption is Red, is the Morgan Freeman character. A hero-driven story is where those two story functions are wrapped up in one character. So we see it through their eyes, and they're also the one dictating the story. Now, the hero-driven story process, like any number of, I'll currently leave them nameless, formulas that are very popular with conventional thinkers, are built around those hero-driven story types. And so when you said you often struggle with writing heroes with strong singular story goals, always understand that the goal changes over the course of the story. When we talk about a hero goal obstacle story, which if you do the 10-day free starter fast screenplay, it's like day 6, we talk about the sort of shape of story. And it's hero goal obstacle. So every story is going to have, not every story, the dynamic of story is that there is a character who wants something, but something gets in the way. And so watching them overcome that obstacle and either getting it or not getting it conveys the meaning or shows the transformation or is what sort of that story is about. Now that is one That is one aspect of story. It's a way to introduce people to story ideas. So don't think that that's the whole of it. But when you're talking about a full movie-length story, that 90 minutes to 100-minute movie, 2-hour movie, 3-hour movie these days, right? You're going to have a character. If a character pursued one thing the entire way, it would be very boring. Because one of the things that we need in a long-form story is twists and turns. We need ups and downs. We need emotional highs and lows. We need what I call the roller coaster, the emotional roller coaster of your story. And so if we're just on one track, getting to pursuing it, it can work, sure, for certain kinds of stories. The Fugitive is more or less a one-track story, one central goal through the whole thing. But most stories are going to have a goal that gets them to a point where something happens, some sort of twist or turn, or this is the conventional storytelling act one turning point. They have a goal that gets them to that point, and then that twist gives them a new goal. There's something else they now need to pursue, right? So when you say what's the goal of the story or what's the hero's goal, well, they have 2 or 3 different goals, right? So from a story standpoint, what is the primary goal that drives the story? They want whatever it is. They want the thing or to get the thing or to achieve XYZ, whatever it is. So if you're struggling to find those strong singular goals, you may be thinking of like an overriding goal. If you think of what I always suggest, what I teach as well, although this may be the first time some of you who have learned from Vast understand that this is what I teach. I really teach and recommend building backwards. So I think the key is to understand where you want to end up. So if you know like the message or the theme or the idea that you want to try to get across, what's the most effective thing that's going to get that across? Well, it's a character who goes through blah, 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 and this happens to them. And that evokes this purpose, this meaning, this transformation, this message, whatever it might be. And if you know that, so what end point do you need to get to? Well, so then you can work backwards and go, okay, so what do I need to set up for this to be the most powerful ending? So in some ways, figuring out a stronger hero, a stronger goal, something that's going to drive your character through that story, can really come from understanding where you need them to get to, and then what would be the twists and turns that would happen on the way to getting there, right? So that the story is, so that you're not starting from the beginning and going, we're going out on this direction, but I have no idea what the twist and turn is going to be. I don't know what my ending is going to be. And then you're like doing all this setup without any knowledge of what the payoff is going to be. You can find a story that way. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people find great stories that way. But I think it's easier to learn to do it the other way around, because if you know where you want to end up, then you go back and you set that up and you create the circumstances that give that emotional resonance. You're going to be able to navigate story, and you're going to be able to understand those dynamics and have that experience of building your first stories. Once you understand those dynamics and they become more second nature, it's much easier at that point to jump in the middle, because then you go, well, okay, and then it could go this way. Oh, and then this could be a cool twist, which then, oh yeah, and then pieces will start to fit together. You just go, right, okay, cool. So that's, yes, and now you see your whole story. This is the nature of it. So this is ultimately the key to figuring out how to build some of these things is really discovering it. I said earlier that I think writing is a process of discovery. And if we accept that writing is a process of discovery, well, then you're maybe not going to know what your character's strongest possible goal is, or the thing that's going to drive them through the project when you first set out on that journey, when you first set out on that process. So don't worry if you start it without knowing. If you have a sense of where it might go, explore it and see where it takes you. You'll be in the moment. You'll be writing some scene. You'll have fleshed out your plan. You'll be sitting down to do your draft, and as you're going through your draft, some idea will pop into your head. because you've done all this work, your creative subconscious serves up ideas. So while you're writing, some idea will pop into your head and you go, oh my God, yes. And then it has to go in this direction. Well, that's going to completely change your plan for the story. But it's going to take you further. It's going to help you see where your story could and should go. So hopefully that makes sense. Someone named The Sweet Idiot said, bleh. I don't know what that means. Does that mean you don't like what I'm having to say here? It distracted me when I looked over and said, bleh. What's bleh? What is bleh? You don't like this? You don't agree? By the way, I'm all good with people criticizing what I say, what I do, writing negative comments, doing a little downvote thing. I get a downvote for almost every video that I make. It's okay, but tell me what you disagree with. Tell me what you don't like or what you think differently. If you think differently about what I'm saying, let's discuss it. Maybe we'll find something new and creative and better that comes from a mutual blend of both of our points of view. Let's see. So Tobias says, no, I understand their points of view, family and friends. Just have to carry on regardless. Agree with you completely. Wrote an ensemble screenplay and was advised that I needed a central character by a studio reader. So, I mean, that opens up so many possible directions I could go with it. People who give notes. They have to give notes. They have to give notes about something. If they don't like your story for some reason, maybe it just doesn't feel right to them, they're going to find some way to rationalize or justify why it didn't feel right to them. That doesn't mean they're right. It may mean, and I'm not saying it's the case in this case, I'm not saying it's the case most of the time, but it could be that it just didn't resonate with them very well, and they don't know how to put it, so they've fallen back on sort of that rule of the conventional wisdom of storytelling. It could be that. It could be that your story needs a central character, that we don't really know who we're following, or none of the ensemble characters rises to the level of audience interest that we don't really care about anyone, right? For every note you get, there are a number of possible realities to it. It could be that the person is spot on. It could be that the person missed the mark entirely. It could be that your writing is way better than they're giving you credit for. It could be that your writing is way inferior to what they're giving you credit for. So there's no real objective way to know. Like for me to know here there's no right or wrong. Sorry about that. There's no right or wrong here for that. But what I would say is, if you're getting that note, it really depends on the story. It really depends on the situation. Usually when you have an ensemble story, it's really that there are central characters. It's just that you have multiple storylines, or characters rise to be central character at different points in the story. So I would argue that you don't actually need one central character through a story, even, especially in an ensemble movie. But there will be, we always do need a character or characters that the audience can relate to or empathize with or care about or be drawn into the story to experience the story vicariously through. And if we don't have that emotional connection and that emotional resonance, the reader often doesn't know how to put into words the thing that they dislike about it. Or it's easier to criticize something than to give you pointers about how to improve that thing, right? So most readers, and I was the same way when I started doing this, I could smell a screenplay that wasn't working a mile away, but I didn't at the time necessarily know how to help you improve that. Over the past 20 years, I figured out how to help you improve that stuff. I would argue that that's not the most common skill. It's not exclusive to me, but it's not widely accessible. So when you're getting notes and feedback, my big sort of key advice is, when you're getting notes and feedback, you always have to understand that that's this one reader's interpretation of what you've written. Not until you have an array of opinions should you take anything to heart too much, because you need to know what the consensus opinion is, not what one person's opinion is. Because one person may love this thing, but that's the one person in the world who will, right? So then you're going to be like, yeah, I'm on the right track. And meanwhile, like, doors keep staying closed. If the consensus is this character's not very likable, well, then with that consensus, you can go back and fix them. Or this ensemble doesn't have a central character. If the consensus is, well, there's no central character, but I really loved the characters that were there, and I loved the journey that you took me on, and I got the point and the message you were trying to convey, it's not going to matter that you don't have a central character. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Shane says, problem is that all script readers and producers and agents also have read all the usual books and sometimes filter your story through those guidelines and paradigms. That's very definitely true. Also, I guess all we can do is write such a great story that they don't notice when we're breaking the rules. Breaking the rules is actually a good thing, but you have to know the rules in order to be able to actually break them, right? Like I know the 3-act structure story, that format very, very well. I can tell you what goes on what page and all that kind of stuff according to the conventional wisdom, and why, not just what it is, but why it is, and when it's not working, why it's not working. Probably 50 to 60% of all stories should fit that model. Like that is the model that reflects how we experience life. So it makes sense that sort of a slight majority of stories would follow that. But because I understand those principles, I can also identify and recognize when a project needs to not go that way, or when you're doing something unique and original that doesn't fit that, but is still effective and working. And most people who've read a lot of screenplays, even if they can pinpoint it or put it into words or not, they will still intuitively recognize a script that quote unquote breaks the rules, but that is compelling in its own right, because the principles involved stand out. If you read enough scripts, you recognize quality, because that quality is rare. So it's like, wow, this one's great. You can't always go, this shouldn't work. I don't know why this one works. If you've only read all the books and think the conventional way that everyone thinks, I don't know why this works, but for some reason it works. You will still, the readers will still intuitively know that it works. And so don't be afraid of that. I can't remember if it was last week or maybe one of the comments on one of the videos, somebody was saying, the readers just don't understand. I'm afraid of writing something that is so original that the readers will reject it because it doesn't fit the model. And it's like, trust me, if you write something that doesn't fit the model that is exceptional, it will get noticed. They will notice it. People in the industry are not stupid. People in the industry are deeply creative, usually. Even if they don't always share your sensibilities or make the kinds of movies that you'd want to make. This is an industry that draws creative people. Like we're all in it to make good stuff. We're in it to make good stuff according to our creative sensibilities and our tastes and our opinions and our points of view. So, of course, those are going to differ based on what you like and what your life experience has brought you to and all that kind of stuff. So just because there is a convention or because people go by some of those rules, don't discount those people as being less capable, because if they've been reading lots of screenplays, they will still recognize the quality when they see it. Let's see. Roland liked the answer from before. Cool. Thank you. Tobias says they have also advised me to say they fight, as I tend to go into the description of the fight, as Jeff suggests, if the readers are very textbook. I'm not sure. I think you're talking about the fight scenes. That people tell you to write a fight scene as they fight? Huh. Okay. Well, that's not correct. That's somebody who does not really understand does not understand the power of screenwriting. Screenwriting is often not perceived in the industry as the most important part of the equation. And in some ways it's not, because screenwriters are writing for a document that is designed to be turned into something else. So you're not writing the end product. You're writing you're writing the movie that inspires everyone to go make the movie. So when they make the movie, they're actually making the movie. So what you want to do is have a screenplay that is powerful and effective and so extraordinary that they want to make this, right? But if this only inspires them to go make that, which has very little resemblance to this, well, this still did its job, right? But this is less important and less relevant. And I think because of just the nature of the fact that when you make movies, you're making movies. You're not making a script, right? I think there's this general sense that screenwriting is the sort of bastard child of the industry, and don't talk to the writer too long, But because most screenplays don't take full advantage of the power of screenwriting, because most screenwriters don't develop their craft to the point that I recommend writers develop their craft to. I think that's bad English. But because of that, I think a lot of people underestimate what you can do with the screenplay. A truly skilled screenwriter, someone who has mastered all these details and these elements, can create something profound and that can transform people. I have read probably 3 screenplays in my life that I was in tears, like literal tears at the end of reading a screenplay. Like, I've read like thousands of screenplays, and they usually don't do that. I'm the reader who reads something very funny and goes, "That's funny," or thinks that was funny. Like, I'm not the guy that's usually laughing out loud at a joke that I read on a screenplay, on a script page, or some funny scene. So when a scene actually makes me actually chuckle, it's like, there's a writer who, at least in this situation, did it very effectively. And if you can aspire to that, then you develop the craft to a place where you can actually shape the movie more effectively. It's hard to describe, but we'll talk more about it as we go along. Let's see. BKLYNX Rage says, Brooklyn? Anyway, sorry for not understanding your username. I hope you didn't feel bad about that. Can you describe the best way to do voiceover narration happening over multiple scenes? Well, it depends on if it's a narrator or if it depends on if it's one of the characters narrating. If it's a narrator, it'll be like a line of dialogue that says narrator, and then you'll write the line of dialogue. Or possibly narrator VO, narrator in parentheses V.O. And then whatever they say. And then you'll just intersperse that throughout the action that you're describing for those scenes. If it's the character, you're just going to put Jeff or John or whoever your character's name is, Sarah. You're going to put the name, and then you're going to put in parentheses V.O. And then it's just written as normal dialogue. So, and then again, you sprinkle that over the action as you would imagine the voiceover unfolding over whatever the events are. Does that make sense? If it's happening over multiple scenes, that's perfectly fine, because it'll say continued, so it'll be Sarah VO in new parentheses continued CONT''D. So if she had a narration here, and then is a slug line for a new scene, and the new bit of action's happening, and then we say Sarah VO and then continued, and she's going. She says the next thing. It's just a continuation. So it's pretty straightforward as far as that goes. Is there anything specific about that confuses you, or that's not? Can you go further into it? Into maybe if I'm not understanding correctly. Let's see. Shane thinks these are great answers. Thanks, Shane. Tobias says, had a reader say they love the script, great idea, but hate the central character, too passive, too depressed. So I don't know what the story is. I don't know what it's impossible for me to know if the reader's right or if you're right. Because, first of all, neither one of you might be right, or both of you might be right, depending on your perspective. You can write a depressed, passive character who is also taking us on an engaging story. There are some people who read passive character or a depressed character, and just think, why do we want to put that on the screen? And they're not even going to be open to that kind of a story idea. But, there's plenty of indie films out there. There's plenty of big budget. There's plenty of successful films out there that are about those kinds of themes. You can't really tell a story about those kinds of themes without those kinds of characters. So you can't say it's wrong to have those kinds of characters. I know there's a general rule of thumb in conventional thinking that you don't want to have a passive central character in your story. And the reason is, for a hero-driven story where you have the character whose actions dictate the plot, and whose story we're experiencing the story through, whose perspective we're experiencing the story through. If they're passive, then the story events happen to them and they're forever responding. There's no real agency in what they're doing. This is hard often for an audience to get behind in a hero-driven story. It's hard for an audience to get behind that kind of a character because it's like, well, you're not even trying. Whether you say that or whether you just intuitively feel that when you're watching that kind of a story. It's hard to care about a character who doesn't care. So that's generally why we don't want a passive central character. The choices that they make in the story aren't choices they've made. They're choices that were made for them. So we're not really watching someone engage in the events of the story. So you're probably not going to have too much of a learning arc or transformation of the character over the course of the story with that type of a situation. Now, that said, if that character became maybe the secondary character, or there was another character who's much more active, maybe you could lift that up. If your story is about depression or about anxiety or about being paralyzed with self-judgment that you don't take any action, well, yeah, they're probably going to be a little bit more passive. Generally, you're going to want those kinds of characters to be engaged with something, because it is, as an audience, hard to care about somebody who doesn't really care. When the stakes are higher, when there's some reason they're fighting for the thing, it pulls us in as an audience. We care when the character cares. If the character doesn't care, it's very easy to just be like, oh, this is so boring. So there's some truth to both possible angles of that. It really depends on the kind of story you're trying to tell, how you're going about telling it, and what effect you want to have on the audience. Without knowing those things, there's no necessarily right or wrong, but that's part of what you as the writer are going to have to discover in order to determine which way forward in that story. Does that make sense? Let's see. Video Vasco says, started a collab for the first time, and I'm feeling a bit weird about rewriting all of the other writers' stuff. It's really not about I'm so special, but if not, it's a bit pedantic and spoon-feeding. So you're saying that their work is pedantic and spoon-feeding? It follows up with, don't want to sound arrogant, but any ideas on how to balance it? So you're finding that your writing partner's work is spoon-feeding and pedantic, and so you're trying to rewrite it to make it more subtle and nuanced and more engaging to the audience, and just that dynamic. So let me know. I know there's a little bit of a delay in the feed here, so let me know once you've heard that, if you can elaborate a little bit more. Writing partnerships are a little bit like yes, in the details, dialogue, and so on. So writing partnerships are like a marriage. You have to find the person that you're in sync with. It can be exciting and it can be super fun, and it can turn bitter very quickly. You kind of have to want the same things and be sort of moving in the same direction. But usually what you'll find is that each of the writers in a partnership will bring skills that the other one doesn't have, or be stronger in this area or maybe weaker in that area. And so finding the equilibrium so that you work best as a team is really is really figuring out where their strengths are and where your strengths are, and working to the best of both of them. If they're a writer who is very on the nose, and they're just explicitly stating in dialogue stuff that either we already know as the audience, or don't tell me this in dialogue, we should be watching this unfold, or just saying what they're feeling very much, just, there's no subtlety to it. I think for the writing partnership to last, I think you need to be honest about those kinds of things and be like, I think we need subtlety here or whatever. If it's not going to work out, it's not going to work out, unless it's some relationship, a collaboration that you're forced to be in, maybe through getting paid for it or through some other thing. If you have to be there, then it's about figuring out how to make it work. If you're trying to see if you can work together, it really becomes about both sides. I believe both sides should be honest with each other and straightforward about what they like, what they don't like, their creative sensibilities, their story philosophy, their approach to scenes, or how they should think about rewriting dialogue. If your writing partner can't take constructive criticism, you're going to run into problems anyway. Okay. Like, writers need to learn how to take constructive criticism. We have a whole section in Fast Screenplay in the alignment phase all about that. So it's like, you have to get good at that. You just have to. Because if you're not, you're always going to interpret what you're saying to your writing partner, for example. They're always going to interpret that kind of thing as an attack. And that's, as a creative team, you have to be able to work together. You're not attacking each other. You want the best. So if you need to challenge that person on that kind of a thing, my recommendation would be to find the thing that you most like about what they do, or what is the good in what it is, and kind of focus on how you're really good at this thing. I think over here we're doing this, and I think we need it to be a little bit more like this. I feel like I'm good at doing that part. Why don't we sort of split the load that way? I think if you come at it from a solutions perspective and a way to try to move forward as a team, rather than to knock them for maybe the skills they don't yet have, then I think you're going to get further with that. So, but I wouldn't feel weird about it. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. Anyway, that's my point of view. I know there are a lot of people out there that are super sensitive to criticism, and I'm just a big believer that bluntness and honesty and straightforward, hey, this isn't working, and here's why, and I'm willing to do another pass at it if you want me to show you what I have in mind. I think that's always going to lead to better outcomes than trying to tiptoe around something and just always feel like, because what will eventually happen if you tiptoe around it is you're just going to start to resent the other person. And if you do in some way write something that ends up getting noticed and you get success and whatever, you're always going to feel like, yeah, it only happened because of me. You're riding my coattails. And at a certain point, there will be a resentment, and that's not conducive to a creative relationship. So I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you need more on that. I meant BKLYNX Rage said, I meant a character doing voiceover narration over multiple locations, like a robber describing a heist while we see the different locales. Okay, so if that's all within one scene, or like a montage or something like that, you're basically going to, as a montage, you don't have to have full slug lines. You can just sort of go to the different locations. So you'd have the narration as described before, and then you'd have outside the bank as the character screams off, and then you have the thing continuing. The slug line might be something like exterior San Francisco City night or whatever, and then like outside the bank, and then going flying up the hill past the trolley car, and then whatever. So you can do it like that. There's any number of different ways to do it. If you just do it as a strict sort of like bullet point montage, or if you do it as specific slug lines with different scenes and different locations, it really is going to depend on what's right for your story and for how you want that to unfold. So hopefully that does make sense. Brooklyn X Rage. Okay, hopefully hope that means you're finished with the rage. Anyway, Toei said, I have no idea who is right. I like the character. He's depressed and has good reason. He tries to do things but fails much of the time. He's trying to repair his marriage, care for his child. So look, again, it's very easy. It's hard to analyze these kinds of things through this. I do hope, and you guys let me know if you want it. Would you want to see more like feedback loop type stuff where we get on and maybe even have you guys call in and we can do a voice thing as we're going through the pages and we can analyze some of your work and focus on how to improve that stuff? Let me know if that's something that you would like to see out of the show. I would like to do it. One of the things that I do want for the show eventually is to have, and by eventually I mean probably about next month, each episode will be a deep dive into a specific aspect of screenwriting. So subplots one week, or how to make a character more authentic, make your characters more authentic another week, or how to build tension another week, or all that kind of thing. So each week will be a different sort of deep dive topic, and I have ideas for why I'm wanting to do that, which I'll reveal as we go along. But in that way, each episode of this show can be really immersive. So doing this kind of a feedback thing either will have to be like the second hour of the show or the third hour of the show, or whatever, or it would have to focus on whatever that topic is. So I don't know. This is stuff that I need your feedback, guys, and let me know what you want to see in the show and where we want to go. So let's see. Let's see. Yep, we're talking about, everybody's talking to Tobias and his characters, passive characters. Ryan Gosling's character from Nice Guys was brought up. Should writers limit the amount of speaking characters in a screenplay? There's no right answer to that. The answer for every question like that, should I do this or should I do that, is it depends entirely on the story that you're telling. It depends on what's right for your project. If you are writing if you're writing Forrest Gump, you're going to have lots of characters, right? That's the nature of that story, because that story is moving through these vignettes throughout history, right? So we're going to see people from all the different places. There's going to be lots of little characters in there, right? Or some, I don't know why Apollo 13 popped in my head. Some other sort of epic that's got all these characters and all these different places, and we're seeing from all this different, because you want that epic, the epicness of it, the scale and scope of it is part of the world of the story, the dynamics of the story that you're telling. So in that case, I would say no, right? If you're writing a low budget movie and it's all about limiting your locations and having actors availability and all that kind of stuff, thinking about the financial aspect of all this kind of stuff, maybe you will. Generally speaking, you don't want characters in your story that are unnecessary. So it's quite possible when we go through the rewriting and the polishing of things in Fast, there is a place where we go and we look at, see if characters are actually necessary, and we eliminate characters that their function can be blended with someone else in the scene, or maybe we need to expand it. Like, this character's trying to do too many things. If we had another character, we could bounce an idea off each other and we could take this whole scene and cut it in half, and it would make the whole thing flow better, right? So it really all depends. There's no rules on that kind of thing. It really does come down to what's the story you're trying to tell, and what's the most effective way to tell that story. Let's see. Thank you, Roland. I've not seen that. Dude, you rock. Thanks, Brooklyn. I appreciate that. Video Vasco says yes. There's a delay on all of it, like as far as when I said it and when I finally get to the things in the chat. So I'm gonna just take that as a yes to all of it. Okay. Fully understood. Okay, don't mention it. In my opinion, it's one of the best comedies to come out in recent years. Which one? Oh, was that? Oh, is that the Nice Guys? Okay, so I got to the end of the chat. So if you guys have any, do you guys have any other specific questions that you'd want to talk about, or let me put it a different way. since we sort of since we've sort of cool since we've sort of gone through the chat here at the moment. We're still hovering around 30 people watching, so thank you guys all for coming. I'm not signing off just yet, but I do want to thank you for that. What I want to know from you guys is, what do you need? Like, one of the things, I don't know if you've seen the earlier video that I made November or December, whatever, whenever I actually put the video up for want versus need. I realized at the end of last year, that one of the challenges that I had is that when I built Fast Screenplay, when I went down that road, I built what writers need. But that's not necessarily what writers want. And so what my whole thing is about now is I want to help you with what you want. I want to give you more stuff, more upfront for free and all that. And we'll use that to build even more tools and resources for you. But I really want to know what we should be talking about from your perspective. I can talk about this stuff all day. I can talk about literally any facet of the entire industry. We're gonna do deep dives into all the different facets. I already have about 200 to 300 episode ideas along that line. So once a week, we're talking 4 to 6 years of this show, if there's enough interest in it, and if I live that long. So, I can steer this, but I would love to know what you guys are interested in and what maybe problem areas you're having. What level are you at? Like, are we talking, are most people here maybe, complete novices? This is your first time even thinking about screenwriting. If so, not to do a little pitch or anything, but go to weekendscreenwriting.com. If you haven't done my weekend workshop, do my weekend workshop. It will help get you up to speed. You'll have a big picture overview of the thing. We do deep dive. I'm going to be building on it more in the year ahead. It will absolutely help. It helps support this. It's all a good thing. But if you're an intermediate writer, you've been struggling for years, you've been writing 5 or 10 scripts, you just can't figure out how to crack that nut. It's like, it still seems as impossible as it did early on, or maybe more so because now you know more and you see how challenging it is. What I would say to each person is different, right? So where this show ends up in sort of like the sweet spot of how I help you, what I teach, all that kind of stuff, is I want it to come from you rather than from me, because clearly I can tell you what I think you need, but if you tell me what you actually need, then I can help you with that and we can get you further faster. And my goal, as I said in the previous episode, which I'll reiterate again now, is I really want to focus on getting writers from being unproduced to being produced. In other words, I want to get you from wherever you are. If you're a beginner, if you're an intermediate who's been struggling for a long time, I want to get you from wherever you are to getting your first film made. How do we get you across that? What gaps do you have? What do you need to know? What things do you think you need to know? Let's talk about those things so that we can overcome those things, give you the tools so you can go out and do that. Be super successful. Go tell everybody about this show. Go, I owe it all to this guy. And then all those people will come here and watch and we'll help them too. And then meanwhile, I'm hoping to build the indie film studio and produce films by writers who've been through Fast Screenplay. So, the more people who can get behind this and who we can help build to that point, the more excited people will be about the thing that I'm trying to build. It helps me, helps you. I kind of feel like that sort of mutually beneficial situation is a good driver. That's my theory. That's the theory I'm working on. I don't know if anyone else agrees or not, but that's what I think. So Video Vasco says yes for the feedback loop style episodes, and yes to all of it. Oracle of Altoona says, I know you lived or live in Australia. Just watched the movie Holy Smoke. It was amazing. Just something OT, sorry. Yes, I lived in Australia and New Zealand, a split about half over a span of about 16 years. I grew up in Los Angeles. I started in the film industry here in LA when I was 12 as a child actor. I started doing movies and TV and commercials and theater and radio and corporate stuff and you name it over a span of almost 15 years. fell in love with the production process, got into working production on music videos and then on TV and then on movies for various production companies around town. I've done pretty much every job there is on a film set, or I've assisted the person who does that job. So everything from camera department to sound department to lighting and electric to logistics, production, planning, all that kind of stuff. I've done pre-production where you develop projects and you work with writers and location scouting, getting investors together, all that stuff, all the way through the post-production side of it, editing, visual effects, sound design, going into the sweetening studio and ADR and all that stuff, marketing, getting projects out into the world and finding new ways to try to market low budget films, all that kind of stuff. For a brief spell in LA, I worked for a guy named Roger Corman, who is the king of the B films, has made like 400-600 films, something like that, genre films, horror and sci-fi and all this kind of stuff. And in 6-month period of time, I worked on 5 different films and I worked on all these different jobs. And I just went, this is the best thing in the world, because working on different projects and going from one project to the next, like you just learn all of it, right? They paid so poorly, I could only work there for 6 months because I couldn't pay my rent anymore and I almost got evicted. So I had to go get a job. But when I moved to Australia, which is now, I moved to Australia in 96. When I moved to Australia, I was there for probably 3 years and I went, I should build that here. I should build a film studio here, just like that one that I worked at for Roger Corman, but not making those kinds of movies, making maybe more highbrow movies, or like sort of I want to make movies that change people's lives and that affect people and give people a new perspective on the world and all that kind of stuff. So like for me, it was really about like, I want to make a higher caliber of movie, but that business model was great. If we can make low budget stuff at first, and then with the profits from this, we expand our budgets as we go along. And so that's when I started looking for scripts. And my friend and I tried to make a little low budget film. We spent about 7 years on it. In the end, we had to abandon it because we didn't finish it. And enough time had passed that the elements of the story were no longer relevant. Like it didn't make sense anymore as a story 7 years later as when I originally I wrote it to be made in like 6 months to a year's time. And my partner on the project got all ambitious and it just turned into this much bigger thing. But because it turned into a bigger thing, it stretched out forever. And we worked very, very hard. In the end, we had to abandon the project. But while we thought we were like 6 months from finishing, I said, we're going to take this to the film market. They're going to go, we don't want to buy that, but we love your enthusiasm and we're impressed by what you could do for so little money. What else have you got? And I would say, here's 3 scripts that I found from 3 writers. We're ready to go on any one of these projects. And they would go, you're so impressive. Here's money. But I couldn't find those 3 projects. And I didn't want to, I wrote the film that my partner and I made, but I didn't want to keep writing because my thought was I want to build a film studio. So if I were to try to write all the scripts, like it's going to take me, at best, it would take me 4 months or so to write a script. Once you get good at that point, I'd probably written about 12 or 15 scripts. Not great scripts, but I'd been doing it for a decade or 15 years already. I started writing when I was 12. So I'd already written a lot and almost sold a couple scripts back in LA. But my thought was if I could, if I had to write it all myself, I would not have the energy to write it all and produce it all and like make 3 to 6 films a year. Like that would just be too much to do all that stuff. So that's why I really made this focus of trying to find writers. And I just went down that rabbit hole and it was just impossible to find writers. And here we are all these years later. So anyway, long story short, cut to a couple of years ago. I came back and forth a lot over the years. When I started building Fast Screenplay, I started building it here in LA, and then I went back to Australia and I tried to sell it and like get people excited about it. And then I had to come back here to try to do more. And anyway, long story short, it stretched out. I then finally met my now wife. We have had a kid, so we're here in LA now for the foreseeable, as they say. But yes, Australia makes some pretty cool movies. They've got a really cool, it's one of the things I found about teaching screenwriting in Australia, since all the books and stuff are all about writing for Hollywood and that sort of conventional 3-act structure. The Australian films have a very indie, quirky, Aussie sensibility. If you haven't been to Australia, you don't really know Australia very well. The sensibility of the Australian is different to the sensibility of the American. So making an American movie in Australia, it doesn't fit. It's not quite right. You just can't do that quintessential 3 act structure story in the same. It doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel Australian, and so the audiences tend to be like, yeah, right, mate. So because of that, I had to think of story in a very different way than. I grew up reading all the books and Sid Field and Robert McKee and Michael Haig and all John Truby, all that stuff. I read all that stuff too. But once you start trying to implement that, firstly, trying to build a film studio, you can't make 10 films of exactly the same story structure because then they're all going to look like carbon. Anyway, there's a lot. So it shaped my way of thinking about story design and sensibilities of entertainment. And also Australian films don't always carry internationally as well. Do we need some of those Hollywood elements in order to make them more universal? And just thinking about all this kind of stuff is what has given me a very different perspective on all this stuff. So anyway, that was one heck of a side trick. Welcome to my brain. Guidance, support, a guru, some way for us to get read to benefit all involved. So just getting read, Tobias, is not. Anyway, okay. I take your suggestions. Some of those things are hard to do. I've done assessments over the years. I've done script editing over the years. I've done mentorships over the years. I've helped writers in a lot of different ways. And what I always found was that it doesn't matter what I'm offering them if they don't have that core knowledge. And that core knowledge does not come from those books. That core knowledge does not come from the conventional thinking. What I've found, what I believe, is that it comes through understanding the process and really learning how to master the process. How do you get from point A to point B? It's that. If a writer doesn't have that, it's really hard to guide or mentor or suggest, hey, go, get your script read over here. I stopped reading scripts and giving feedback or assessments or this kind of stuff. It just takes too long. And I would give these great notes. Maybe they were sucky notes, but I thought they were great notes. They were super in depth, and I would spend like a week on assessment. And then the writer would be like, you didn't get it. It's like, okay, I did, but okay. But if that writer doesn't have a way to implement those notes, it's kind of a waste of everybody's time and money. So that's why I focused on building the system that I built, was because it's just, I feel like you need that and then build all the other stuff on top of that. So that's kind of what I'm about. So I'm not going to really be offering too much in the way of services and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to be able to read everybody's script, but I will read stuff on here so we can talk principles and so I can highlight certain things. So in other words, if I'm giving you feedback on your project, I want to do it so that it benefits everyone, right? So, because it doesn't make much sense time-wise for me to give you feedback on your project one-on-one. I would argue I'm not sure there's much benefit in that anywhere, but I just know if you don't have the tools to implement, it's a hard thing to do. So anyway, we'll try to do that within the context of the show, and that'll hopefully tap into some of that desire and get us somewhere. Shane says, I'd like to talk about in a future episode how to tap into the unlimited opportunities you talk about. I very much want to do that. I had an idea to do that today, and then I thought, no, I'd rather sort of dig deeper into it. One of the things that I'm trying to do, one of the things I would like to do is build a team. So I've tried to work with volunteers over the years. Volunteers come and go, and it's hard to sort of build a team with volunteers. So I'm trying to see if I can find people that I can pay, but since this isn't generating any money at the moment, or very like little bits and pieces here and there, I do everything at cost. So when somebody signs up for FAST or they sign up for the weekend workshop, all that money just goes right back into all this. So it's not, so we're forever cash poor. So building a team has been hard. Like if everybody joins and we make money that way, all the money is going to go into paying a staff, right? Like that's where I would rather put the money. So if we had the staff, what I would have them do is do some of the research on some of the things so that I can create more concise ideas and instruction and stuff within this, and then after we do this, then we'll build upon that to create a resource, the proceeds from which can go into building and expanding this. So hopefully that makes sense. But yes, I agree. We'll definitely be doing that. I'm talking about the practical aspects of connecting with those opportunities. Yeah, that's totally. Jamie says, thanks, Jeff. For me, I've written a feature close to a fourth draft and need feedback and direction on steps forward, how to contact producers, talent. Yeah, so Jamie, this is one of the problems I find with Fast Screenplay is like people don't sign up for Fast Screenplay because they want what you want. They've written a draft, and so they want to jump straight to the part where you connect with producers or join competitions or whatever. And what I have found is that there are 7 distinct phases to the process, and until you and the way I built mine was that when we focus on those things, finding producers, using talent agents or talent competitions, getting an agent, whatever. By the time you get to there, you actually, in order to do that effectively, you need the skills from over here, right? So the refinement skills or the strategy skills or the perseverance skills or whatever it might be. So for me, well, I will do that on this show. We'll talk about a lot of that kind of stuff. But you have to understand, when we talk about that kind of stuff, I've come to realize that that's what you guys want. That's not what you guys need. What you need is the whole process. The reason you're not connecting with a producer or production company, the reason an agent won't read your script, the reason you're not winning at a competition is because you've missed steps along the way. You have gaps in your knowledge or your skill base that is making it you're not able to get to that place. Now, I know that's a kind of an a-hole thing for me to say. It's a bit rude. It's a bit, I don't know you. How can I make a blanket statement like that? But this is what I have found over the years from interacting with thousands of writers, is that we don't know what we don't know. And it's very easy to assume that we're ready for a later step in the process that we really are not ready for yet, that we haven't earned. And I'm not saying that's the case with you. I'm just saying that the challenge that I have in presenting this stuff and in helping writers is I know everyone wants to go straight to the end. But if you look at it from my standpoint, we looked at 30,000 project submissions over an 18-year span of time. 30,000. I personally read about 7,000 screenplays. We found 26, 27 total that we could say yes to out of 30,000. Like, it was less than 1 in 1,000. I know that seems crazy, but that's legitimately what it is. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean there's only 1 in 1,000 that could be sold anywhere. That's what was right for us. That was what got submitted to us. So if you're looking at how do I connect with a producer, you have to understand, first of all, who's your project right for? How are we going to connect with that? How are we going to find and connect with? How are we going to draw them in and then exceed their expectations? Go beyond what they need. Give them what helps them get to where they're trying to go. Writers are coming at it from like, how do I sell my project? I have this great idea. I have this movie I want to make. And I get it. I was a creative person. I've written countless screenplays myself. I get it. That didn't get made, by the way. So I get it. But the way to make it happen, it's that alignment thing, right? So anyway, just so you know, I'm happy to go there. I'm happy to talk about all this stuff. We'll go into all the details, and I'm not going to hold anything back. But those are my reservations. Those are the challenges that I really wish writers would understand more. Maybe it's just a matter of time. Maybe you have to like stick with me for a while. Today's June 10th, right? 1 year from now, let's see where you're at. If you were to join the system, you'd have learned the whole system in that time, or you could. Some of you guys are stuck in the middle because you're overthinking it, but you could. It's designed to be learned in that time. So let's see where we're at a year from now, and do it your own way. That's fine, totally cool. But will you have filled in all those gaps in that time? Maybe, maybe not. If you can fill in all those gaps, you'll be ready for the stuff. I'll teach it to you here anyway, for free. Don't worry about it. I will teach you that stuff. I'm just saying it's really hard to implement, and a lot of what I'm going to say may sound easier said than done, but it's all very doable if you have that skill set. It just takes time to develop the skill. So anyway, I'll let it unfold a little, and we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Roland says, I have a question, not really screenwriting question. Do you think film festivals are the best way to get your foot in the door in terms of getting an agent or possible future investors? Yes, absolutely. End of story. I started a film festival. I ran a film festival for 5 years in New Zealand called the Big Mountain Short Film Festival. And one of the things I learned at that festival was we had film submissions from all around the world. We had writers fly in from all around the world. We had not just writers, filmmakers. Usually it was the filmmaker, the producer, the director. They would come in. It was a small town. We used to run this in the middle of New Zealand, and people would come from all over the place, hours to get there. They'd spend a couple days there with us. We'd all network and have dinner and whatever. It was great. It was awesome. And the thing that you realize is this is how you meet people. This is how you network, because these people are going to be either at your level or where you're trying to get to. Now, you still have to be ready for that. To go there knowing nothing, not having written anything, and just having an idea in your head, you're going to be wasting the money that it's not wasting. You'll still learn, you'll still watch films, you'll still enjoy, you'll still network and whatever, but you're not going to make those connections unless you're ready. It's all about synchronicity. It's all about alignment. And I was invited to be a jurist on the Kuala Lumpur International Film Festival one year, and it was fantastic. We watched like 100 different projects, 100 different movies in 5 days or something like that. It was insane. They were all subtitled. It was exhausting, but it was amazing. I still have friends today who are filmmakers making movies all around the world that I met through that. And so, yes, absolutely a fantastic way to do it, but it should be part of the larger strategy. So keep a pin in that, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. Tobias says, I think we'd all like to go from unproduced to produced. Would like to write for a living, but not in it for the money, just as well. So, yes, been on your IMDb. Don't go on my IMDb. It's I've been doing this for 20 years, and my IMDb is anemic. Yes. So, we don't have to be in it for the money, but still watching. It takes a lot to develop the skills to write a screenplay that is an extraordinary read. But seeing that turned into a movie helps you understand the writing part of it, in a whole different way. So this is why I think it's so important that I build an engine for that, an engine to help writers plug that missing gap. That's what I'm about. That's what I'd really like to do. Because at the end of the day, I want to make lots and lots of movies. I want to make highbrow movies, sure. But at the end of the day, I just love the movie making process. I've loved it since I was a kid. So if we're making movies with production teams all around the world that are written by people who have taken the time to go through and develop all these skills and really master this craft to the best of their then ability, like, I want to be the person that facilitates that. So whether we can build that or not, I don't know. It's a two-way street, guys. So it's not, I'll do as much as I can and have done for 20-something years now. We're here because we're still building. So join me if you can, or don't if you don't want to. Clyche said, scored an 8 on my feature screenplay on the blacklist. Should I look for an agent or try to sell to a producer? Interested more on the business side, as I'm well versed in screenwriting. Okay. There's no answer to that. What's right for your project? What's right for you? Should I look for an agent or try to sell a producer? How many scripts have you written? You've written one that got an 8 on the blacklist, but how many scripts have you actually written? Let me see if you're looking for feedback on your script, the blacklist is perfect. It's ran by people in the industry. Okay. Okay. I don't want to. I have mixed feelings about the feedback sources and all that stuff. I used to do it. It's not easy. It's they're way underpaid for what they do. If they give good feedback, I find that it's very hit or miss. You're probably very likely to not get great. I don't know about the blacklist specifically or any place specifically, but getting screenwriting feedback from folks on the internet who are writers just like you is great. All feedback is good if you know how to use feedback. If you if you don't have a way to incorporate feedback into your process, then what are you getting feedback for? Feedback is part of the writing process. Think of it that way. Feedback is part of the writing process. So if it's feedback from your mother who knows nothing about screenwriting, or if it's feedback from a studio executive who knows everything about screenwriting, at the end of the day, all it's really doing is telling you how how your project landed with this reader. You need aggregate opinion. So getting feedback from one place, or getting feedback from people who know as much as you do, is fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't necessarily understand some of the nuances or things that people who've been reading for years and years or thousands of scripts would know. So it's very hit or miss, and there's no real way to know when you send your work in to get it read, is this being read by someone with scads of experience and has produced films of their own so they can view it from the producer's perspective, or is this someone fresh out of school, or maybe who just got into screenwriting, read a few books and learned how to give coverage, and this is their 12th script that they're giving coverage on? You're going to get charged the same for both of those probably. So and I don't even hold those people. I don't even complain about that, because I know how hard that is to do. So it's like, it's just a challenging situation. Anyway, just because your project scores high on the blacklist does not mean you're ready for a producer. It does not mean you're ready for an agent. So I don't know you, and I don't know your project, so I can't really give you advice on if you should look for an agent or try to sell to a producer. But I would say, I've written a few shorts and freelancing work, never wrote a full-length feature. So the blacklist one is a feature. Yes, okay. But you've written a few shorts. I would not reach out to an agent until you have at least 3 projects that can score that high or higher on that kind of a resource. An agent is not going to take all of their years of experience in network building and all that to try to sell your one project. An agent wants clients. They want people that writers that they represent. And the thing that's going to entice an agent is going to be an ability to see long-term income earning potential in you and your writing and your work. So until you have a few different projects, all of which demonstrate that, it's, as a general rule of thumb, there are always exceptions, but as a general rule of thumb, until you have that, an agent isn't, you can probably do more for yourself than the agent. If you can go out and make a deal happen, then you go to an agent and you say, I need you to negotiate this deal for me. They'll be more likely to take you on board. Trying to sell to a producer depends on what budget level you're looking at, and I don't know enough about all of this and getting into some of those kinds of questions. I just want you to think about those kinds of questions at this point, because there's no real right answer there. So anyway, I hope that helps to some degree. Probably not, but you say you're well versed in screenwriting. I do have to say, you say you're well versed in screenwriting, but you also say you've only written a few shorts and this is your first feature. So being well versed in something, I mean, I read 10 books, probably 10 books, did probably 6 or 8 different screenwriting courses. I did live workshops. I did as a student, as a writer in my teens and early 20s, and wrote about 10 or 15 scripts. It was not until I wrote and tried to produce a film and spent 7 years trying to make it, and failed, by the way, that I finally really understood screenwriting. And I would argue that everything I did prior to that should never have been ever sent anywhere. Even stuff that got close to making a deal. I had one project that was optioned, not for any money, but it was optioned. And I had another project that I think sold, but again, not for any money. It was for like a deal on the back end, whatever. That didn't end up getting made, so that was worth the paper it was printed on. But I look back at some of those old archives now, and I'm just like, yeah, no, this is all the stuff that I would say no to if it was submitted to me. So anyway, all I'm saying is everyone wants to rush into the deal. Everyone wants to get their script sold or get an agent or get a producer. It's like, wait as long as you can to do that, because you want to go in as strong, and you want to go in and be like the overnight success. And the only way the overnight success happens is if you spend 10 years preparing for it. You know what I mean? Don't just blast into it. Anyway, I'm not, it's just some of the ways that you've worded it. I'm not trying to call you out on any of that, but let's see. Big fan of Roger Corman movies. Tobias says 8 on Blacklist, very good. Personally, I just want to write and work alongside creative and inspiring individuals. That's cool. I bet you also want to be famous and make money too, probably. See, Oracle of Altoona said, years ago I did write a feature-length screenplay, decided that writing a novel, self-publishing might work for me. Still love screenwriting though. Yes, Aussies are so much themselves. So writing and self-publishing a novel is cool. Totally different thing to screenplays. It's a very different type of writing. I would probably argue that screenwriting is a lot harder. And you can self-publish a novel. You can't really self-publish a screenplay. I mean, you can, but it doesn't really do much. More about the weekend workshop that you mentioned. Also curious if this live project will work hand-in-hand with Fast Screenplay. So, Chris, thank you for asking about that. The weekend workshop, so when I first started teaching screenwriting, the very first thing I offered was an 8-week workshop. The idea was to go from idea to first draft in 8 weeks. I had about 12 or 15 people sign up for this thing. We got to about week 3, and I realized this was never going to happen, because at least in Australia, at least at the time, people just did not know much about screenwriting. And so I was spending so much time trying to like fill in the basics that I kind of assumed they would all know if they signed up for a workshop like this, that we just got nowhere near the goal at the end of that. Everybody loved the workshop, but we did not get where we were trying to go. So I decided to sort of pull out all the things you need to know before you sit down to do a first draft workshop, and put that into what I call the weekend workshop, the weekend screenwriting workshop. And it was 12 hours, 6 hours Saturday, 6 hours Sunday, jam-packed. It was in person. I had 12 to 15 people. I went through everything, script formatting and how the business works, and strategy and story building and character building and dialogue and world building and scene design and all that stuff, the process, all of it. And I really sort of distilled all that stuff into the essentials of what, like, how to take someone from not really knowing anything or thinking they know what all they need to know to actually knowing what they need to know in one weekend. So that way on Monday, the theory was we could jump into idea to first draft, the hard part, but the fun part of actually implementing. So I ended up running the weekend screenwriting workshop like 80 times over the next 5 years to over 1,200 participants or something like that in like 10 cities and 6 countries. And it was great, but it really burned me out because I was renting hotels and doing flights and renting venues, and I made no money at the end of it. So I'm doing all this. And at some point I realized like nobody's following through on this. Nobody wants to go on and do the actual job of writing. Everyone just wants to learn and go, wow, that's great, thanks, I feel good about myself. And I'm like, what am I doing this for? Like, this is not getting me any closer to it. So that was when I burned out of teaching screenwriting. I took a break and went off and started a film festival. Won an award for making a DVD for schools showing kids how to make short films. Some prestigious award in Australia. Anyway, eventually I'm still not getting anywhere closer to it, which is when I sat down and built Fast Screenplay. And I said, I don't want to run around doing all these workshops, but people need to know this stuff. So I created Fast Screenplay and just the entire process. Fast Screenplay is a year-long program that takes you through the entire process, from before you even have that idea to finding a powerful idea, all the way to story development, writing, rewriting, polishing, testing, alignment, connecting with a producer and making a deal. So it takes you through the entire, if you actually do it, it takes you through the entire process. But what I realized at some point was that this is such a big ask for people. Would you like to commit to joining me for a year to go through a rather arduous process to learn the entire process by doing? It's taken me about 10 years, but I've suddenly realized, yeah, this is, I think people maybe want an easier entry. And so I thought, well, why don't I bring back the weekend screenwriting workshop? So rather than run around and fly around and do venues and all that stuff, why don't I create an online version of it? And so what I'm doing is I'm iteratively creating that workshop. So I sort of updated it for today. The opportunities today are like vastly expanded from the way they were 20 years ago when I first ran this workshop live. So there's a bit of updating to do with all the opportunity that's available to us today. So I've woven that into it. I've tried to crystallize and distill things. I did session number 1 in January. That's available on demand right now. If you join at weekendscreenwriting.com, you can access that. You can ask questions. You can interact on that site. And then you're also going to be able to join all the upcoming live sessions where I will iteratively refine that workshop and take that workshop even further. And eventually what I want to do is turn that workshop into a tool that any writer could effectively go, I have an idea for a movie. They could sit down, they could immerse into sort of an abbreviated version of the weekend, like the fast track, if anyone knows fast screenplay, like a fast track version of that workshop, and just and basically through doing a series of exercises in the weekend, end up with sort of a roadmap for launching into their project that they could then start on Monday, right? It's on demand, so you can do it whatever day you want, or binge it, or stretch it out over weeks, or whatever you want to do. But the idea is if you want to sort of do it on the weekend and then jump into your project on Monday, then you could do that. So that's that. I'm continuing to build and evolve that over time. The first session was fantastic. I think feedback I got was great. So it's already something you can jump into, and then we can expand on it as we go. This live project, yes, it absolutely works hand in hand with Fast Screenplay. So one of the things that when I built Fast Screenplay, one of the ideas that I had for it was that at the end of Fast Screenplay, when people complete the system, you learn by doing. You go through the process, right? But at the end of the process, you're able to go back through it more quickly, more intuitively with every subsequent project. But obviously I can't teach you everything you need to know in one thing, right? For the weekend workshop is everything you need to know before you sit down to write a screenplay. That doesn't mean it's everything there is to know about screenwriting, right? With Fast Screenplay, we build like 200 to 300 different skills through the process, but there's still techniques and things and other expanded ideas. And so what I thought I'd do with this show is each week we'll do a deep dive into a different aspect of screenwriting. And then what I'll do is I'll take the discussion and all the stuff that came up through it, and with a team, we'll go further into all that stuff. We'll expand it out. I'll create creativity prompts and analysis tools, so that if we do an episode on subplots, for example, we'll create creativity tools to help you build new subplots for your story, or figure out the most effective way to tell a subplot for your story. We'll do a deep dive in that. There's subplots in the system. We do talk about subplots, and we weave it through the process, but we can go so much further. We can expand so much deeper. So the idea was, what I wanted to do was at the end of Fast Screenplay was to open up a technique library for writers who've been through the process. But so many people didn't follow through and get to the end that there's no way to actually make that happen, right? Like there's not enough interest in it to justify the time and the expense of building a technique library for people who are never going to see it. So what I thought was, when this epiphany happened in November, my thought was, why don't I give you what you want rather than what you need, that thing that I already built? Why don't I give you what you want and take the technique library and build it out as a public thing that anyone can use, whether you join me in Fast or not. You can still access these resource modules. So I thought, how do we build these resource modules? Well, why don't I do a live stream where we basically do a deep dive on the subject, and then I'll take all of that, refine it, clean it up, throw away all the extraneous stuff, dig deeper, do further research, look into myths and misconceptions that were brought up, create these tools to help you in that topic, expand that out. And then in that way, gradually build a library that anyone can use at any time, but that also works synergistically with the system itself. So everything works together. In my opinion, probably the best way to go about doing it The best way is just to do fast screenplay. But if you're not sure about that, the best way is to do the weekend screenwriting workshop first, because you'll get that sort of big overview. You'll have a sense of what we're trying to do here, and then jump into fast screenplay. As the modules are built for what I'm going to be calling essential screenwriting, which will be this new resource that comes out of the live stream, that will be able to be used by anyone. You can just go, hey, I like that. There's a module on dialogue. My dialogue sucks. Let me just get that one little module. Or you'll be able to get bundles, or you'll be able to get lifetime access to all of it. This is assuming that I can build it the way that I want to. I don't yet have a team to help me build this. So either I'll need lots of volunteers. Anyone want to raise their hand, let me know. Or I need to generate revenue from all this stuff that I pour right back into building that. My goal at the end of the day is not to make money off of writers. My goal is to provide you with tools that help you get where you're trying to go at cost. I don't make a profit. I never have out of all this stuff. My goal is to get writers through this to the point where at the end of Fast Screenplay, we can start writing projects for production, because in theory, you'll have the skill set to be able to do that. So let's put our money where our mouth is at that point and go make movies with the writers who've developed those skills, and then build the film studio out of that. I have a whole distribution model and plan for this so that it can scale to making dozens, eventually hundreds, if there's enough interest in it, of films each year. So it's super ambitious. I know it sounds probably impossible. There's probably big things that I'm leaving out that would make it seem plausible, but that's sort of the goal. And yes, it does all sort of fit together. I talked more about that stuff than I promised I would. So thank you for indulging me. Let's see. If you for feedback, that's fine. Okay. Any gaps in knowledge? All right. The only route for getting feedback and read in the UK is through the internet competitions, blacklist, etc. There does not seem to be any other way. It's really hard to get feedback. It's really hard to get my feedback when I had been writing for 15 years sucked. The feedback after I had tried to make a film and after I had started teaching screenwriting, my feedback got really good. And so it's hard to get that good feedback. The other thing to understand about feedback is a writer will inherently see something differently to a producer. A producer, a little bit of a side note, but competitions, screenwriting competitions. Every competition has to pick a winner, even if that winner is okay. Producers do not ever have to say yes. They will say yes if it's a great project and it's a project that they're aligned with, right? When readers give feedback, they're giving feedback from a writer's point of view. And just because the writing is great and it's got punchy dialogue and great characters and blah, 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 does not mean it's producible. Just because something wins a competition does not mean it's producible. So one of the things that I have found that is sorely missing, and there's just no way around it, is that most feedback that writers get does not come from the producer's perspective. The perspective of the person whose job it would be to actually take your project and turn it into a film, right? Like, that is a missing gap. That's the gap that I'm trying to fill through what I've been trying to do through all these years. It's a challenging bridge to gap to cross. So I feel you, Tobias, as that it's a hard thing to do. What I built into my system, in not to go back to my system, but to try to solve this problem, maybe you can take this and extrapolate if you don't join me in the system, is what I did was I realized the alignment phase is all about getting notes and feedback. If you can learn how to extract from the notes and feedback an objective assessment of how your project is landing, then that's going to help you understand if it's landing the way you want it to land, if it's accomplishing the thing that you want it to accomplish. Because really, it doesn't matter what this one person's opinion is. The only opinion that matters is the producer who says yes to your project. If I say I love your project, it doesn't matter if I'm not going to be the one that produces your project. The only opinion that matters is that producer's opinion, or the team that would help you make the project, or the team that could, or the people who could get you in the hands of the team that would make that project, right? Like, so feedback is a tricky thing. You need to not, we all want that sort of sense of, am I doing it right? Am I doing it well? What do I need to change, or how do I need to go about fixing it to make it good and effective and well? And I understand the need for it. I understand the desire, the urge, but you need to take feedback as sort of a whole thing and learn how to use feedback as part of your rewrite process, because the opinion itself doesn't really matter. And so how well it fits is so entirely subjective. So I want to call out the super chat from Third Eye Pirates, $4.99. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I've never done this super chat thing before, so you're the first super chat. Appreciate that. He said, I emailed Jeff this weekend. He personally took a lot of time to explain his process. I can't wait to start. You will notice that to be true. If you email me, I'm very good about emailing back. I am obsessive about getting you to your goal. So it really is a question of, I want you to understand this stuff. I'm not trying to sell you something you don't want. If you don't want to join me, that's okay. It genuinely is okay. There's a thousand different ways to get to your path. I feel like I've created the shortest route, but if you have a different approach you want to take, totally fine. But if you email me and you ask me questions, I will elaborate. I write long emails to try to help you see the whole picture. I will tell you the negative aspects of what I do just as quickly as I'll tell you the salesy aspects of it, the upside. Because at the end of the day, it's not about making money off of you. I do it at cost. So at the end of the day, whether you join me or not, that's okay. I want you to join me because I want you to have these skills quicker and we'll get there faster. But it just goes right back into the thing. So thank you for that super chat. That's a very cool thing. I clicked the button to start that thing, and hopefully we'll build that over time. I'll remember to tell people about it. Let's see. So Clyde Chase says, yes, till now, so I should keep writing and have more ammunition in my arsenal. That's true. I believe blacklist includes managers, producers, and writers. Yeah, that's true. But you gotta understand, like, it's like people who are the industry connections on script competitions and stuff like that. It's like they're recruiting people who, yes, maybe they are looking, they don't probably expect to get something out of that. So how aggressively they're I don't want to talk negatively about it, because every situation is going to be unique. I can only tell you that when I did a pitch fest years ago, I was a producer at a pitch fest, and it was one of these things where, like, 3 minutes later or whatever it was, the bell dings and a new writer sits down and starts pitching you their project. And I was there with a couple of producer friends who were also part of it. And like afterwards, I mean, I'm much more like sympathetic to writers and very, because I know your struggle. Some of the things they were saying, I was like, oh my God, like really rolling their eyes. And I just thought, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. There were not really any great pitches here, but also just the format is really weird, right? Like, it's like everyone wants the synergy to happen naturally. Like, everyone wants to, if you were making movies, you'd want to make movies with your friends. You'd want to make movies with people you like and people you care about and have a good rapport with, and maybe somebody you've made films with in the past. So, like, you wanted to start developing those relationships rather than, like, there's always this really awkward thing of when you're trying to break in, what you're really trying to break into is an interpersonal human relationship. And that's not really how relationships work by and large, right? So as much as possible, we want to more replicate how human relationships work, because it's a relationship industry. So, anyway, we'll go more into that as we go. I'm running out of time here. I've already gone past what was supposed to be my hard out. Do you think it's okay to develop the characters slowly if it's not a movie but a TV series? I'm not sure how people will react to the lack of character emphasis in the pilot. So you're working on a TV project and you're not really focusing on the central characters. You're focusing probably more on the setup of the situation itself. I think there's no right or wrong answer to this kind of a question because it's a very subjective thing. I don't know your story. I don't know what it's about. Like in theory, I could imagine situations where it would be perfectly okay to do what you're describing. I could see other situations where if you're doing what you're describing, you're not really giving us a way into your story. So I don't know your story well enough to know for sure. Always remember that movies and story, TV, all of this is we're telling stories to take an audience on an emotional journey so that we teach them something, we share something with them, we give them our idea of some sort or give them some sort of an experience. If your story's doing that without us like hooking into a specific character, then it's doing that, right? If it's not doing that for some reason, or if you could create a character who is going through that experience and therefore we experience it more fully, well, then it's going to be more effective that way. See what I'm saying? So it depends very much on the specifics of it. But I do think by and large, anything is possible. And any story idea you have in mind, even if it completely bucks all the conventions, is achievable. Doesn't mean it's the right way to go. And it doesn't mean that taking a simpler approach, being more conventional, might be a more effective way to achieve your end goal. It really depends on what you're trying to do, right? So that's why, as you'll see, I hope you'll stick with me over the course of this series, and as I get more and more refined with this thing, and we can go further and deeper into all different aspects, I think you'll start to see the breadth and scope of all this, and you'll see that there's just so many moving parts, and every part, like that ball of yarn, affects every other part. So it's the big picture, it's the whole story, it's the act level, it's the scene level, the dialogue level, the experience level. So hope that makes sense. Let's see, always gotta have more than one script ready. Can you be a famous screenwriter? I mean, Aaron Sorkin is. I heard they are generally ignored at celebrity parties. Yeah, probably, but oftentimes they're not very sociable. They spend a lot of time in front of a computer and don't get out and meet people too much. So their social skills are maybe leave something to be desired. I've met screenwriters who are easy to tell a story at a party, and they hear some little thing, and they just roll into a story. It takes into account the situation, and it makes everybody feel at ease, and they become the life of the party. This is storytelling also. So is that you? Maybe, maybe not. There's a lot of introverted people that want to be screenwriters. So you don't have to be good at parties necessarily. But just remember, it is the relationship industry. So Charlie Kaufman, yep, there you go. Charlie Kaufman's one of my favorites, and he's very unconventional. Let's see, what happened to that film you were making some time ago? It's collecting dust somewhere, and hopefully the celluloid is being eaten away by the hands of time. I have to pay for my feedback. It sucks, but it helps. Yes, I understand. Tend to follow an instruction to change a script if 2 or 3 people have the same view on a character or plot point. I would suggest 10 people, but I hear you. So informative. Thank you. Good. Blacklist is expensive. Competitions are expensive too. You have to factor it when you get into the marketing stage. I treat the marketing stage as its own thing. Don't even start it until you have a tested, viable, production-ready page-turner screenplay. Until you're there, don't even worry about producers and competitions and agents and any of that stuff. Once you're there, there's a specific strategy. I will lay it out on this. We take you through it and fast, but there will be some money to be spent. I heard this great interview with Diane Bell, who's a screenwriter. I heard her on a podcast that they just interviewed me for, so I listened to this her interview by the same interviewer on the podcast. And she was living in Scotland, I think it was Scotland, and was asked if she could come in for a meeting next week by an agent in LA. And she said, sure. So she, on her credit card, put a trip from Scotland to to Los Angeles the next day. So, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So it's a little expensive. I'm going to try to hopefully build a system that doesn't require that, but we'll see how we go. Okay. Blake Snyder's Save the Cat gets another mention this week. We'll talk about Save the Cat at some point. There's a lot of really good principles in there, but people treat it as people follow it as if it's a formula and a set of rules, and I think they love it because it's a set of rules, and I think that becomes very problematic. So I'm just a big believer that, especially in the indie world, which I believe is a good way to go if you're trying to break in, because the indie world is more accessible to you, and success in the indie world will open up the studio world. Because of that, I think you need to think a little more unconventionally to stand out in the indie world, and to get noticed by those more accessible producer and film people types. And so I'm more of a believer in tapping into your unique voice and your unique approach and finding unconventional ways of doing things. I do believe in learning the conventional stuff too, and storytelling is storytelling. If it's strong and effective, it's gonna get you somewhere. But anyway, so we'll talk more about that stuff. All right, I've placed in competitions, but even after that, I don't know what to do next, says Tobias. This is the problem. People think that the competition is going to be the win. If you place in a competition, not if you placed, forget placing. If you win a competition, you can use that possibly as part of your marketing strategy. In my opinion, that's the reason to use competitions. And it's not a bad reason to use competitions, so I don't think there's necessarily a problem with them per se, but you really need to focus on sort of a handful of them, and you have to use them strategically within your marketing. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. Anyway, I have gone longer than I'm wanting to go. I'm hoping to end these at like 4, maybe pushing it to 5, but after 5 is like I gotta break this all down pretty quickly. So I'm gonna have to leave it at that. I want to thank you very much for joining me. If you have any interest in any interest in joining me on the things that I've put together for you, I promise you they are worth their weight in gold. I do offer money back guarantee if you're not happy. Have a look on the websites, and I want you to be happy. I want you to get where you're trying to go. And so I've built tools to help you get there. One of them is weekendscreenwriting.com. The other one is fastscreenplay.com. Fast Screenplay has a 10-day free start. The Weekend Screenwriting Workshop, it's 1 weekend. So 12 hours worth of content. It goes deeper than some 8-week courses I've seen out there. So have a look if you can. And then please join me next week. Next week, I will have this setup working better. I will have better audio. I will have better video. We'll have cuts away. It won't just be this one picture of me. We'll have some visual interest going on. Hopefully, I'll get this down pat. And then either the following week or the week after that, we can start jumping into our deep dives onto specific topics. But if you have any questions about anything throughout the week along the way, please don't hesitate to pop them in the comments below on the replay of this video, or send me an email about literally anything. You will get a response, in many cases a lengthy response. I'm here to help, whatever I can do. So let me know. And I hope to see you next time. And thank you so much for joining me. Thanks so much for watching. And don't forget to actually write. Keep moving forward. Take action. Consistent, ongoing, daily action. And that's how we're going to get where we're trying to go. So thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Fade to black.